It's the packet contents for the February 8th, 2000 Drug Utilization Review Board meeting, correct?
Yes.
And Your Honor, we offer J710 into evidence.
No objection other than it's outside the scope.
I'll overrule the objection and allow J710 to the evidence.
And if you look on the first page, we publish, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
If we look on the first page, Ms. White, we see that one of the the agenda items for the board is item F, which is discuss and vote on retrospective DUR criteria changes, correct? Can you see that?
Sorry, say it one more time. Oh, I keep looking at the top. I thought you said the first item. I see that.
Now I want you to turn to Appendix F, which starts on page 47. And then within that, if you'll go forward a few more pages, I want to go to page 54.
You want me to turn to page 47 or page 54?
Well, just as a reference point, page 47 is where Appendix F starts, correct?
Yes.
And then it runs through to page 54, which is what I want to focus on.
Yes.
And this is under the heading duration, correct?
It says the duration at the top of the page.
And this contains old and new durations for various medications within this retrospective DUR criteria changes section, correct?
You're asking me if it contains old and new drug variations?
You see the durations. You see the heading here is duration.
Uh-huh.
And you see there are various different medications listed, correct?
I do see that there's various medications listed.
And there's both an old and a new column, correct?
Correct.
And if you go about halfway down the page, you'll get to the category of narcotic analgesics, right?
Yes.
And you see the old or existing duration limit there for hydrocodone, actually for all narcotic analgesics, was 30, correct?
It says 30 in the old column under duration for narcotic analgesics.
And that includes hydrocodone products, correct?
Hydrocodone is listed there.
And that also includes oxycodone products, correct?
Oxycodone is listed there.
And tramadol is listed next. You see that there as well, correct?
After oxycodone is not tramadol.
After the narcotic analgesics category.
Yes.
And for each of these, the indication for the new duration is going to be to remove the limit, correct?
It says remove in the new column.
So prior to this time, a doctor writing a single script for hydrocodone, oxycodone, methadone, or any other of the narcotic analgesics in that section was limited to 30 days for reimbursement, correct?
I don't know if that's what that means based on this, if that's what you're asking me.
Okay, so that's not something you're familiar with and not part of the history of duration limits within the healthcare authority for narcotic analgesics?
Is your question if I'm not familiar with it? I'm saying I'm not familiar with this document.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, it is.
I'm not familiar. I'm looking at it now for the first time, but I'm not familiar with it, if that's what you're asking me.
And this is not something that you looked at in the course of forming these causation opinions, which you were called upon to offer to the court this morning, correct?
No, but if I had been looking at it, I would have looked at page 1 where it lists who's present, and it talks about Jack Vaughn, the Director of Government Affairs for Johnson & Johnson. And the DUR board, I believe, has a place on the pharma board, on the DUR board that is a slot filled by pharma. So I would have taken all of that into account in forming my opinion, but no, I had not looked at this document.
And you do not, for that reason, you don't know what was said by any particular person at that meeting, if anything, correct?
I don't know what was said by any particular person at that meeting.
But you do know that what the DUR board recommended was to remove duration limits for narcotic analgesics as of the time of its February 8th, 2000 meeting, correct?
No, what this document is saying is that this is the packet that was sent prior to the meeting. This isn't the actions that were taken at the meeting.
This is what was proposed for a vote to the DUR board, correct?
It looks like this was something that was going to be considered by the board, but I thought what you asked me is if this is what they did, and this is in no way documenting what the board did. This was a packet sent prior to the board meeting taking place.
Well, let's take a look at actual utilization of oxycodone and see if we can decode this a little bit. And if I may approach Your Honor and bring up a subsequent exhibit.
Yes, you may.
That's on three.
Thank you.
And as a starting point, Ms. White, there's some writing in red on the top of that first page. It says Ron's copy. That's the way this document was produced to us. But let me ask you, this is the drug utilization, this is a memorandum to Drug Utilization Review Board members dated July 5th, 2001, correct?
Yes, that's what it says.
And this is the packet that was being provided to the members in advance of the July 10th, 2001 meeting, right?
It appears to be that.
And Your Honor will offer J729.
No objection.
J729 will be admitted into the evidence.
And on the first page, you see the agenda, correct? May we publish, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Ms. White, my question is, do you see the agenda on the first page?
Yes, there appears to be an agenda on page 1, 2, and then another agenda on page 3 and 4.
There's a more detailed agenda for the meeting that begins on page 3, but the overview, which includes a list of the materials. Actually, let me focus you on the list of the materials. On page 1, we have a list of the materials that are included in the packet. Fair?
I haven't looked to see if these are the materials in the packet since I just got it.
All right. Well, it indicates enclosed are the following items related to the July meeting. Material is arranged in order of the agenda. Do you see that?
It does say the materials arranged in order of the agenda.
And if you look down toward the bottom of the page, you'll see an indication that one of the materials in Appendix I was for review and discuss OxyContin utilization, correct?
Yes.
And that appendix, which I want to focus on, starts on page 71. You there?
Almost. Yes.
And at the bottom of the page, it appears that this document was created by pharmacy management consultants with the University of Oklahoma College of Pharmacy, correct?
It has that name on the bottom of the page.
And it's dated June 29th, 2001, right?
That date is on the bottom of the page.
Now, quick question for you. Do you know what OxyContin is specifically indicated for in terms of dosage?
No.
So to put it more precisely and specifically, do you know that OxyContin is indicated for use every 12 hours?
No, if I don't know, I wouldn't know more precisely or specifically either.
All right, that's not something you looked at or considered in the course of preparing to offer causation opinions to the court?
No.
All right, let's keep going through the document. And we see section 2 is OxyContin utilization in Oklahoma Medicaid patients. It's on page 71. We have it up on the screen as well, if it's easier to read there.
Thank you.
And to, actually, before we look at that, if you look at the prior sentence, it indicates on dosage, the dosage for oxycodone. Oxycodone should be dosed every 12 hours with immediate release oxycodone with or without adjuvants for breakthrough pain if necessary. Do you see that?
I see that it says that.
All right. And then it indicates with respect to the various different dosages, again, every 12 hours and every 12 hours, correct?
Did you say every 12 hours and every 12 hours?
It indicates it 2 more times, correct?
Your Honor, I object. She said she doesn't know, and just showing her that this document says it doesn't change the fact she still doesn't know.
I sustain the objection.
Let me ask it this way. So according to the Drug Utilization Review Board in 2001, in this document, according to the University of Oklahoma College of Pharmacy, oxycodone should be dosed every 12 hours, right?
I don't know if they're saying, I don't know.
All right, why don't you move down? Let's look at OxyContin utilization in Oklahoma Medicaid patients. And I want to focus on what it tells us about current use. And if we look at it, it indicates that, and if I may approach the screen, Your Honor.
Yes, you
This
may.
will be a little easier. What they looked at was utilization trends of OxyContin usage in the Oklahoma Medicaid population during the past 5 years, right?
That's what that says.
And they concluded, based upon that review, that OxyContin usage has nearly doubled every year since its release in 1996, correct?
That's what that says.
And if we scroll down a little bit, Ms. Conway, we see that that pattern existed both for prescriptions of OxyContin, correct?
That's what that says.
And for the number of patients, different patients receiving OxyContin, right?
That's what it says.
And you have no reason to doubt the utilization analysis that was presented by the Oklahoma College of Pharmacy, correct?
I don't have any idea if this is correct, because I've never seen it before, but I agree with the premise that opioid use began increasing significantly in 1996.
All right, and one of the things that we also see in this document, if we turn to page 73, you there?
Yes.
Is that the Drug Utilization Review Board members were provided with a copy of the Rational Drug Therapy Program from the West Virginia Bureau of Medical Services, correct?
This document, this page is titled Rational Drug Therapy Program, WVBMS Drug Therapy Guidelines.
Right, and the guideline that was presented to the Oklahoma board was was West Virginia's guideline to meet the goal that is set out here, a goal of program to achieve the effective pain relief at the dosing interval of every 12 hours and the use of most appropriate dosage strengths for oxycodone sustained release criteria. Right?
Is that what you're asking me, right? You had read it. I wasn't sure if you were asking me something.
I'm asking you if that was presented as the goal of that program.
It says that's what it says.
And one of the criteria was prior approval, right? Prior approval required for any prescription written for chronic intractable pain for greater than 2 tablets per day of any one strength of oxycodone sustained release, right?
It says that?
All right, and if you turn back to the prior page, at the time this was presented to the board, one of the things that the board was also looking at in terms of utilization of OxyContin was included, if we go to page 72, Ms. Conway.
Is that you? Are you Miss Conway?
She's
Oh, sorry.
attacked.
I'll remember that now. I'm sorry.
She is the one who has complete
No, I
control
know,
over
I
what
just
appears on the screen. So.
Didn't remember your name. I apologize.
So we see frequency distribution is one of the things that was highlighted by the College of Pharmacy, right?
It appears to be.
And what they observed in their utilization review with respect to OxyContin was that while 799 patients received only one OxyContin prescription, 647 received 2 to 5, and 60 received 15 prescriptions or more, correct?
That's what it says?
And they also observed that, and this is if we go down into the section B of the conclusion, that at that time OxyContin had been receiving national attention due to abuse that was being reported, correct?
That's what it says?
And that's what the College of Pharmacy reported to the Drug Utilization Review Board in this analysis that was included as part of the July 2001 meeting packet, correct?
It says that?
And what they did is they went on to note that some states had enacted policies to help reduce the potential for abuse or diversion of OxyContin, to ensure proper use of the drug, and to control increasing costs. And then they cite to what West Virginia had done, what we just looked at, placing OxyContin on prior authorization status for any dosing greater than 2 tablets per day of any strength and a maximum of 2 different strengths at one time, right?
Pardon me, Your Honor, I must object. He is reading multiple sentences there. The question is inherently compound. I'm looking at periods after several of those sentences. So I don't see how a witness is supposed to know what she's supposed to say. Just reading from the document, that's compound.
Your Honor, I'm happy to stop at the end of every sentence and ask a question. I thought these were related enough, but if Mr. Whitten would prefer I do it that way, I can do it that way as well.
I overrule the objection.
I'm sorry, I need mine.
The question is simply whether this was being presented at this time to the DUR board as something that West Virginia, as an example, had done, enacted as a policy to help reduce the potential for abuse or diversion of OxyContin, to ensure proper use of the drug, and to control increasing costs.
It says this on this document.
And this was back in 2001, correct?
Yes.
And as an expert witness in the causes of the opioid crisis, would you agree that what West Virginia was doing and the limits that they were proposing were a reasonable step for a state to take?
I don't know enough about what was going on in West Virginia at that time to say whether it was a reasonable step to take or not.
Well, certainly you know, as an expert on the causes of the opioid crisis, that this state, Oklahoma, did not at that time adopt a prior approval requirement for OxyContin back in 2001, correct?
Are you asking me if they adopted that at this meeting?
I'm asking you if the state of Oklahoma adopted a prior authorization requirement for OxyContin back in 2001.
I don't know.
All right, not something you looked at in forming your opinions as to the causes of the opioid crisis in the state of Oklahoma?
No, that's not something I looked at.
All right, let's move forward to 2002, and if I may approach, Your Honor.
You may.
Thank you.
And Ms. White, if you would take a look at Exhibit 2455, this is a packet of information. The memo is dated May 8th, 2002, and it's the packet contents for the board meeting of May 14th, 2002, correct?
Correct.
And Your Honor, we would offer J 2455 into evidence,
No objection.
J 2455 will be admitted.
and may we publish?
You may publish.
And on the first page of this document, we're going to bring it up on the screen, you'll see a list of items. It says enclosed are the following items related to the May meeting with material in order of the agenda, correct?
Correct.
And if we look down to the item at Appendix E, it indicates review and discuss current trends in OxyContin usage, correct?
That is what it says.
All right, and I want to turn to that section, and we'll go to page 45. Are you there?
I believe so.
All right, and this is the start of the materials that are included within Appendix E, correct?
It appears to be.
And it's current trends in OxyContin usage, right?
That's the title of the document.
And down at the bottom, there's a reference to the OUHSC. That's the Oklahoma University Health Sciences Center, right?
Yes.
And the date on this is May 8th, 2002, right?
That is the date at the bottom.
And it's marked confidential, right?
It does say confidential.
All right, so the first subject on this document is labeled OxyContin abuse, right?
Yes.
And it describes the drug, describes its indication. And then if we look at section B, there's an indication that tablets are crushed and ingested, snorted or injected to circumvent controlled release mechanism and obtain full dose immediately. Do you see that?
Yes.
And this was what was presented to the DUR board members in May of 2002 as an explanation of the ways that OxyContin was being abused, right?
I don't know if it's an explanation of the way it's being abused, but that information is listed under OxyContin abuse.
Okay, and if we look at the next section on this page, what the OU Health Sciences Center presented to the board members was the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA statement to the House Committee on Appropriations from December 11th, 2001, right?
The next page or the next section?
The next section.
The next section, yes.
And one of the things that they noted and referenced was a consensus statement between the DEA and the healthcare community that the undertreatment of pain is a serious problem in the United States, correct?
Is this referring to the 1997 consensus statement?
It is referring to a consensus statement, as you see from the document, between DEA and healthcare community, correct?
So I'm looking at that and the use of opioid for the chronic treatment of pain, which was the consensus statement of the American Academy of Pain Medicine and the American Pain Society, which is from 1997, which is the consensus statement the J&J lawyer was the author of that was talked about earlier in this trial.
So let me ask you this. The J&J lawyer that you're referencing, were you here for Dr. Kolodny's cross-examination?
I was here for the majority of Dr. Kolodny's testimony, definitely for some of his cross-examination. I do not know if I was here for all of it.
And were you here for the portion of his cross-examination where he said that although Mr. Angalora, who was a lawyer at, well, first of all, he said he knew that he was a lawyer at the law firm of Hyman Phelps and McNamara in Washington, D.C., correct?
I don't remember if he said that.
So you missed that part of the trial?
I'm not saying if I missed it, I just don't remember that name that you just said, that long name.
And were you here when he indicated that the person who he had referred to as a J&J lawyer was speaking as outside counsel for the company, fully disclosed to Congress when he testified years earlier, 1989 or 1990, to a House committee on the subject of diversion of poppy straw that was being produced in India?
You're asking me if I was here when that was said?
Were you here when Dr. Kolodny acknowledged that in cross-examination?
I don't remember. I remember there was a discussion about poppy straw, but I don't remember if that's what he said. The part that I remember that Dr. Kolodny said was that this was one of the first and most damaging, as it was setting the stage for the influence of J&J, specifically through their attorney, the gentleman that you mentioned, where the consensus statement specifically talks about how there's an undertreatment of pain and that there's a low risk for abuse, and that this was promulgated and started the entire discussion about the undertreatment of pain and the low risk and potential for abuse of these products, which is just not true, and the dangers of this document as a KOL. And it appears that that document has then influenced the University of Oklahoma Health Science Center potentially, and then was included in the DUR packet.
Well, we don't have to guess, do we, at the source for that statement as to the consensus statement of the Drug Enforcement Agency of the United States of America and the health community, because there is a citation, it's footnote 2, and if we go 2 pages further to page 48, we see that the reference is to congressional testimony, a statement of Asa Hutchinson, the administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration, before the House Committee on Appropriations Subcommittee on Commerce, Justice, State, and the Judiciary, right?
This appears to be a news article, and the consensus statement that I'm referring to that I was, excuse me, asking if it was the same consensus statement, and it sounds like it is. The actual original is the use of opioids for pain, for the chronic treatment of pain, a source from the American Academy of Pain Medicine and the American Pain Society. And on that document, which is already admitted into evidence, it talks about who the authors are, and it includes Robert Angola, and I'm probably not saying that right, Esquire, who was a counsel for J&J, is my understanding in the testimony that I heard.
And so you therefore missed the testimony from Dr. Kolodny where he conceded that he was aware of no evidence suggesting that Mr. Angarola was acting as a lawyer for Johnson & Johnson at the time that he was part of the group that is cited as having been involved in the preparation of the 1997 consensus statement?
I object that it's mischaracterization of what was said, Your Honor.
Your Honor, it's not a mischaracterization. It's exactly what Dr. Kolodny admitted. And it sounds as if Ms. White was not here at that time, and she's offered speculation as to a connection that there's no evidence that's been introduced that existed at that time.
It is, and she's answering these questions. She wasn't at this. She said she didn't know, but he mischaracterized the
I
testimony.
overruled the objection. Ms. White can answer to the best of her ability.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Question is, were you here during Dr. Kolodny's testimony on cross-examination when he admitted that he was not aware of any evidence that Mr. Angarola was acting as a lawyer for Johnson & Johnson at the time he did work with the committee that ultimately produced that 1997 consensus statement?
I don't remember him saying that.
All right, and so if you were not here then, you very likely didn't get to hear anything about Mr. Angarola's background from the time before he went into private practice at Hyman Phelps and McNamara, right?
If I wasn't here then, I didn't hear it? Is that what you're asking me?
Well, I'm asking you if you're aware of the testimony that has been elicited about his background, for example, his background working at the White House in the 1970s.
I do not remember hearing that.
All right, so you were unaware and are unaware as you sit here today about the history of his work in drug control policy for the United States government. Fair?
That's correct. My knowledge of him is as the J&J lawyer that was one of the authors of this document.
All right, the next section of the report from the OU Health Sciences Center relates to, and it's, if we go back, section 3.
I'm sorry.
The first page of that subsection is coming. Summary of,
What page are you on?
I'm on page 45 of the document.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
And you see at the bottom, there's a summary of medical examiner reports on oxycodone-related deaths, correct?
Yes, it says that.
And the OU Health Sciences Center indicated that 775 medical examiners were sent letters requesting reports on all deaths induced by, associated with, or related to oxycodone and/or specifically the oxycodone product OxyContin for 2000 and 2001, correct?
It says that.
And there are various tables presented following that, and I want to focus on page 47, if you would. And in particular on the quantity counts per claim. Let me know when you're there.
Sorry, I'm just trying, I have never seen this before, so I'm just trying to make sure I understand all of it and read part of it.
Take as much time as you need and just let me know when you're ready.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
So I want to focus on the quantity counts per claim. You there?
Yes.
And you see that they are divided into different sections, starting at 68 tablets or less, correct?
That's what it appears to be, yes.
And for example, this shows 3,381 claims that had between 69 and 120 tablets, right?
Yes.
And as it goes on, we see 460 claims for 122 to 186 tablets, right?
That's what it says, yes.
And even as we go down the line, we get to 2 claims for between 500 and 560 tablets, right?
Yes.
And if the College of Pharmacy is correct, in that prior document we saw that it's a 12-hour, every 12-hour, that's would be twice a day, right?
If you took it every 12 hours?
Correct?
Correct.
And so that would be, if we divide 500 by 2, that would be enough OxyContin for 250 days, wouldn't it?
Yes, I think this is very clear about the oversupply in Oklahoma.
And as you remember, what we looked at previously, we looked back at 2000, and we saw that there was an indication of an old 30 limit duration associated with narcotic analgesics, and in the new column, we saw the word remove, correct?
We saw columns that said that.
And certainly 69 or more tablets of OxyContin over a 30-day period would be in excess of that, a 30-day limit, right?
I'm sorry, say that part again?
So let me, if I may approach, Your Honor. So even at this level, 69 to 120, right? Yes?
Yes, I see that.
If we take that 120 and we divide that by 2, that's 60, right?
Correct.
And if you're taking it twice a day, that would be a 60-day supply, correct?
Correct.
And a 60-day supply of OxyContin is inconsistent with a 30-day duration limit applicable to a prescription claim, correct?
Potentially, yes, and I think this is exactly the point that I have stated, that we have an oversupply of opioids in the state of Oklahoma that caused a significant problem. You had me skip a page, and one of the things that I'm reading on the page that you had me skip talks about how 80% of the products sold in 2000 were OxyContin. And if you look at the influence maps that have been shown in this case, you all had a seat on the DUR board as J&J. You sent representatives to the J&J board. You listed as one of the entities you were trying to influence. We referenced the position statement that the J&J lawyer was the author of. This is the whole point that I'm trying to make when you were asking what I was saying about causation, is that you influenced through multiple ways the idea that we needed to prescribe more opioids, that we had an issue with undertreated pain, and that these had a low abuse for potential. And you duped many, many Oklahomans, and that's what I think you're seeing the result of here.
So what we're looking at here is from 2002. By the way, when you refer to J&J having a seat on the DUR board, are you referring to the statutory provision for a representative of pharma to be on the board?
Correct.
So you're not referring to somebody who is a Johnson & Johnson employee being on the DUR board, are you?
I don't know if Johnson & Johnson held the seat that pharma had. I did see that they were in attendance in one of the meetings when I read that name to you, but it was listed as an attendee, so I don't know if you all chose to just attend and try to influence through that way, or if at any point you all had an actual seat, if you sat in the rep for pharma, because I don't know who sat in those reps,
So
but I
when
know that there was a seat.
So when you said Johnson & Johnson had a seat on the DUR board, that's simply not true, is it?
I'm saying, I should have said pharma had a seat on the board, and I'm saying I don't know if someone from J&J ever held that seat. I know that you all attended the meetings based on the list of attendees, but I don't know, it doesn't say what entities or who they're from on the attendees list, so I don't know that answer.
And the meetings are public, right?
Yes, they're public meetings.
Attendees are listed,
Correct.
minutes are taken,
I believe that's true.
and in fact, the meetings are recorded, aren't they?
I don't know that.
Audio tapes exist of those meetings, right?
I don't know that.
I'll represent to you that we have testimony in this case that there are audio tapes of these meetings. The audio tapes were produced to us in the case and have been available to the state as well as to us throughout the litigation. And by the way, the pharma representative on the DUR board is representing the entire industry, all products, and providing input and information that is in the view of those who pass the statutory requirement, helpful for the kinds of prospective and retrospective utilization review that is done by the DUR board. Fair?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
Pharma is broader than Johnson & Johnson. It's an industry association, correct?
Correct. Pharma is broader than Johnson & Johnson, but certainly represents multiple manufacturers of opioid medication, including Johnson & Johnson.
And you're not suggesting that you, sitting there today, Ms. White, have any evidence that a pharma representative somehow commandeered and unduly and improperly influenced Oklahoma's Drug Utilization Review Board, are you?
I think if you look at your own influence map, the Nucenta influence map that's been admitted into evidence here, and I think we have it, or had it, if you want me to show you what I'm talking about. In your own documents, you talk about your attempts to influence multiple parts of state government, including the Medicaid agency. And I can show you what I'm talking about if that would be helpful.
I want you to focus, Ms. White, on my question.
I really thought I was, I'm sorry.
Which is, are you aware of any evidence suggesting that the Oklahoma Drug Utilization Review Board took any inappropriate or improper action as a result of undue influence by the duly appointed representative to that board, one of many who sat on the board at any given time from pharma?
Okay, say that again.
You are suggesting, are you not, Ms. White, that the non-voting pharma representative on the DUR board, by the way, were you aware that the pharma representative was a non-voting member?
Yes.
And should I take it from your testimony that you are suggesting that the non-voting pharma representative put on that board by statute unduly influenced any decision that the DUR board ever made about any drug?
When you say unduly, I'm not sure how to answer it, so I'm going to do my best to answer your question. If you would put up the influence map, I can show you even better. But what I'm suggesting is that Johnson & Johnson and Janssen, as part of their participation in pharma and a host of other areas, absolutely attempted to influence state policy around opioids. They specifically targeted Medicaid agencies, which would include, from what you're saying to me, the DUR board. The DUR board is an advisory board, but it is part of the Medicaid agency. They did things like the consensus statement that was then used and referenced in one of J&J's lawyers authored and then was used and referenced in the DUR board. And so when you say unduly, because I'm not a lawyer, I'm not entirely certain if I'm saying unduly, but what I am saying very clearly and trying to be as clear with you and with the court as possible is that I believe J&J and Janssen absolutely influenced Medicaid policy. And I believe that there's testimony that I reviewed where the healthcare authority says they believe they were influenced. They don't use the word unduly. So I don't know how to fit the unduly word in, and I apologize, I don't know how to use that
Let me
word.
ask you this as a threshold question, and then I want to get back to the questions I was asking about the document. First, though, I know that Mr. Whitten is sitting here with his influence map right behind him, and he's going to have lots of time to question you about it.
I don't believe that's his map.
On redirect, and it's his demonstrative, Ms. White. The question I want to get back to, though, is you indicated that the reports that you are seeing on page 46 of this document, to you, I mean, and you specifically went to this page when I was asking you about the next page, right?
When you had asked me about page 45 and then went to 47, and I was saying that I attempted to read 46 as we were going through, and there was something I wanted to reference.
Right, and you wanted to reference the fact that you thought that page 46 told you that there was over-prescribing going on in a situation where I think you said 80% of the products were OxyContin.
I was saying I think I see several things in this document that indicate exactly what I was trying to say earlier, that we, and have testified to, that we had an oversupply of opioids in the state of Oklahoma, and that was the cause of the problem.
And
I don't think I would...
She went through.
Sure, go ahead.
And what I was trying to say is I was scanning it quickly, but I didn't have, was I think what it was saying, but I don't know because I've not seen this document until you handed it to me. On page 46, based on a single entity product market, 81.4% of products sold in 2000 were for OxyContin. And I'm saying that if that statement is true and accurate, this is one more example of the oversupply of opioids in the state of Oklahoma that was the cause of this epidemic.
And this is, in your view, I take it, an example of the oversupply of OxyContin that was presented as information to the Drug Utilization Review Board back in 2002, correct?
I think this is an example of the oversupply of opioids in the state of Oklahoma. This is an example in 2002 that the specific product referenced is one of the opioids. It's one of the opioids that Janssen was the primary manufacturer of the API for. And I think that there was, and you keep referring to this, you don't keep, but the influence map that I was trying to show you is the Janssen Nucynta influence map that shows all the places that you all were trying to influence to sell more product, and you were doing things including the 1997 consensus statement authored by the J&J lawyer that we discussed earlier, saying we had an undertreatment of pain, that these products have a low risk for abuse, and this is exactly the problem, exactly the information that you heard Mr. Stone testify to that influenced Oklahoma's oversupply problem. That's what I'm trying to say.
And because I don't think I got an answer to my question was, this is an example of what, in your view, this is, in your view, an example of the oversupply of OxyContin that was presented in information provided to Oklahoma's Drug Utilization Review Board in 2002, correct?
This is an example of the oversupply problem in Oklahoma. What I said is this is an example of the oversupply program in Oklahoma and what the cause for that was, because you had asked me earlier about cause.
And this was presented to the board in 2002, correct?
I believe so, yes.
At a time when if we go back to the quantity limits chart on page 47, thousands of people were receiving quantities of OxyContin that exceeded the amounts that could be properly dosed over 30 days, correct?
This doesn't speak to how many people were receiving it, but I absolutely believe that we had an oversupply problem.
And you mentioned, by the way, in one of the answers you gave, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, right?
Correct.
You aware of anybody who has ever gotten a prescription for Thebane?
Am I aware that Thebane is an active ingredient in opioids, or are you asking me if I'm aware that someone has written a script for Thebane?
The latter.
I'm not aware if someone has written a script for Thebane or not.
All right, so let's talk about other drugs in Oklahoma. OxyContin abuse was not the only drug issue in the state of Oklahoma around this 2002 time period, correct?
Correct.
And if I may approach Your Honor with another exhibit.
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
And I've handed you a copy of a Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs Control annual report for 2003. You see that?
I see that's the title, yes.
And you're familiar with the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drug Control, correct?
Yes, I am.
And I expect that through your work at the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, you are also familiar with some of the information that they collect on illegal drug use, diversion, similar subjects, right?
Yes.
All right, Your Honor, we would offer J542 into evidence.
No objection.
J542 will be admitted into the evidence.
And I want to specifically focus on the information presented on page 21. You let me know when you get there. When may we publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
Ms. White, we're simply going to focus on the report on methamphetamines. If there's something else in this document that is to you, I'm sure that Mr. Whitten will have an opportunity to ask you as many questions about it as he wants.
I just have never seen it, so I was trying to glance through it as I was going to that page to make sure I understand what it is.
You there?
Yes, I am.
We have it on the screen.
Thank you.
And what this report from the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drug Control shows is a significant increase in the number of methamphetamine labs that were seized in Oklahoma year by year from the 1996 up through the 2003 time period, as reflected here, correct?
That's what it says, yes.
All right, let's go back to the board. And if I may approach, Your Honor.
You may.
Ms. White, I have handed you a copy of the DURB packet dated January 8th, 2003 for the board meeting of January 14th, 2003, correct?
Correct.
Same year as the report from OBN that we just looked at on methamphetamine labs that had been seized, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, we'd offer J796 into evidence,
No objection.
J796 will be admitted.
and may we publish?
You may.
So one of the materials, items enclosed with this meeting packet was Appendix C, which is listed as action item, review and vote on Sooner Care formulary change requests for January 2003, right?
I see that.
And one of the other issues we see is listed as Appendix G there, and that is review and discuss utilization of OxyContin follow-up, right?
I see that.
All right, and if you would, please turn to page 37. And when you're there.
On my copy, the page numbers are cut off.
So if you look at the Bates numbers at the bottom, the Bates number for this document ends in 109 on that page.
Yes.
And this is a letter from Melanie Maxwell to Ms. Nancy Nesser, correct?
Correct.
And Nancy Nesser is listed at that time as the pharmacy director for the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority, correct?
Correct.
I assume you know Ms. Nesser?
I do.
And what is written here is the following are proposed changes for the January 1, 2003 Community Care Sooner Care formulary, right?
That's what it says?
And there are various recommendations, and one of the recommendations is prior authorization required for OxyContin limited to 60 tablets per 30 days, correct?
That's what it says?
And that's, are you familiar with what's known as quantity limit?
In general, yes.
All right. And according to this document at least, we saw a reference in 2001 in one of the earlier documents we looked at where we were looking at the reference to the West Virginia prescribing policies. We saw a reference to a PA for a quality limit, right? Or a quantity limit, excuse me.
I believe so.
All right, and so it appears from this document that as of January 1st, 2003, at least for the Community Care Sooner Care formulary, no such quantity limit had been imposed by the Healthcare Authority, correct?
It doesn't say that. No, it doesn't say that.
All right, it suggests that they are considering adding to the existing language to impose a prior authorization for any amount beyond 60 tablets in 30 days, correct?
I see that.
All right. So if we go back to, let's see if I can find the right page here. Actually, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to go forward a month, if I may approach, Your Honor.
You may.
Maybe keep this one out. Thank you.
And I've handed you a copy of the packet contents for the February 11th, 2003 meeting. And it's dated, the cover memorandum with the packet is dated February 5th, 2003, and that's for the board meeting that was coming up 6 days later, right?
Yes.
And Your Honor, we'd offer J1522 into evidence.
No objection.
J1522 will be admitted into the evidence, and you may publish.
Thank you. And I want to look at the more detailed agenda items. And I'm going to go to page 11. Let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
And we see there, that's agenda item at the bottom of the page, number 5, correct?
I see an agenda item number 5, yes.
And the agenda item is review and vote on Sooner Care formulary change requests for January 2003, right?
That's what it says, yes.
And we see a reference to the community care HMO, right? 5B.
Oh, yes, sorry, thank you.
And the prior document we looked at, the letter to Ms. Nesser referenced the community care, Sooner Care formulary, correct?
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
The prior document that we looked at, the letter to Ms. Nesser,
Uh-huh.
had referenced the community care, Sooner Care formulary, right?
I don't remember.
It was,
I can look.
if you want to take a look, it was the January packet. It was page 37. It was the one that was a little blurry at the bottom. So
Oh, where the numbers were cut off?
Yep, the Bates
Yeah.
number is ends in 109 there. You're welcome to take a look.
Yes, I see that.
All right. So this contains a public comment on the review and vote on the Sooner Care formulary change requests, right?
It appears to.
And we see there a comment from Annette Prince, Assistant Oklahoma Attorney General, right?
Yes.
And what is contained in the minutes is, my name is Annette Prince, and I'm Assistant Attorney General. I did represent the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority for 2 years full-time on behalf of the Attorney General. For the past 2 years, I have continued as liaison with the Healthcare Authority. So at that point in time, the Attorney General's office had a lawyer acting as a liaison to the Healthcare Authority, correct?
That's what it says.
And she indicated that Attorney General Edmondson had asked her to come tonight to inquire about this particular proposal on behalf of Community Care, a Medicaid HMO, right?
That's what it says.
And she indicated, as recounted in the minutes here, that the information I received today, as I understand it, the request is that the Healthcare Authority, through this board, approve prior authorization for prescription of OxyContin beyond 60 tablets per 30 days, right?
That's what it says.
And then she indicates, so based on my understanding, that would mean if a physician prescribed OxyContin to his patient after the first prescription, the physician would have to obtain prior authorization from Community Care in order to exceed 60 tablets per month if he thought that was an appropriate prescription for the patient. You see that?
I see that.
And then it carries over to the next page. Attorney General Edmondson, if we can stop at the top there, would ask that the members of the board tonight look at this very closely and take it under your serious consideration. His concerns are that this proposal will serve as a chilling effect on physicians' treatment of pain, right?
That's what it says.
And then he indicates it is OxyContin is an extremely effective pain medication. He views it at best an insult to the physician who is treating the patient who feels that every patient should be assessed for pain by their physician, right?
That's what it says?
And then if you go down to the bottom of the minutes of Ms. Prince's statement, excuse me. You see the sentence that begins, "and finally," if I may approach, Your Honor.
You may.
Ms. Conlon beat me to it. Starting now.
Yes.
Read it slow.
And finally, I would ask each of you on the board, particularly, what would you want if you were in chronic pain, if you were in advanced disease and you were in pain? What would you want for your family? What would you want for your child, for your wife, for your parent? And so that's why I came. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your consideration. That's how she concluded her statement, right?
It is. It sounds incredibly reminiscent of what we saw earlier testimony on about J&J's SWAT teams that went out to the Board of Pharmacy to try to keep tramadol from being in any way restricted. It sounds exactly like the messages that you've been shown during this case and that the court has been shown during this case. It was trying to say chronic pain is undertreated. This is a huge problem. Trying to scare people into, including physicians, that this needed to be addressed. And the influence map showed all the places that were influenced, including law enforcement, which would include the Attorney General's office at that time. This is, yes, I see this, and this is exactly the messages that were being promulgated over and over and over in that spider map and those areas of influence.
And promulgated by the Attorney General's office in the state of Oklahoma in 2003.
No, what I'm saying is promulgated by Johnson & Johnson and Janssen, targeting Medicaid agencies, pharmacy boards, law enforcement, including the district attorney's office. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Oklahomans were duped by that marketing campaign. The marketing campaign you saw Mr. Stone talk about as being an incredible and effective marketing campaign, convincing people of this very information. And the information that you're showing me here is information incredibly reminiscent of what we've seen presented in this case already, the confidential documents that were held by J&J and Janssen saying these things.
And this is information coming from an assistant attorney general in the Attorney General Edmondson's office, right?
This quote is coming from the Attorney General, law enforcement, and again, influenced the entire state of Oklahoma was listed as a primary target and preyed upon with this exact type of information, including law enforcement, which would include the Attorney General's office.
And government reports, federal government reports, state government reports, federal government policy, senior employees at the Department of Health and Human Services, the Drug Enforcement Agency. Can't credit a single thing that anybody said in the year 2003 if it is inconsistent with the positions being taken today in the state of Oklahoma.
Your Honor, I must object. First, it's compound. And secondly, among the many things he's asking her to comment on is the federal, which doesn't belong in this case.
Your Honor, first of all, we just saw that DUR board was presenting information about federal standards and requirements to its members in explaining what their duties are when they act on the board.
The only reason we saw it is, even though it doesn't have anything to do with my direct exam, he's the one that brought it up, but which one is she supposed to answer? There were about 10 parts to that, and one of them was federal. So I object to compound, and I object to him asking about federal.
I'll tell you what, Your Honor, I'll withdraw the question before you sustain it.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Let's turn to page 14. And this again is a continuation of the minutes from the January meeting, correct?
I believe so.
And focus in the middle of the page, there's a reference to a Dr. Crenshaw, who is a DUR board member. You there?
Yes, I believe so.
And he explained to the board, by the way, you see the name Melanie Maxwell there from Community Care?
Yes, I do.
And she is the one who authored the letter to Ms. Nesser that presented the action item prior to the January meeting, correct?
I believe that is what we saw.
Now, Dr. Crenshaw explained, I'm a practicing physician in a small town in Oklahoma. Were those actually on the bottle, TID doses or things? Because I've used OxyContin in terminal care patients where I would write it for 2 in the morning and 1 in the evening or vice versa, trying to graduate the dose up rather than, and I guess what you're asking me to do then is to, if I want to take 40 milligrams in the morning and 20 in the evening, to write a separate prescription for a 20 milligram dose and a separate prescription for the 40 milligram dose, right?
That's the words it says, yes.
But what Ms. Maxwell said to him was actually if it's a terminal patient, you can completely eliminate them from this particular edit at all, right?
That's what it says?
So she was going to explain that the concern about a terminal patient being impacted by this was not a valid concern on the part of Dr. Crenshaw, right?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Sure, she wanted to be sure Dr. Crenshaw understood that concerns about prescribing for a terminal patient were not valid concerns based on the edit and the quantity limit that was being proposed to the board, correct?
I don't know what she wanted to be sure of.
All right, well, we do know how he responded, don't we? He said, we've also had patients who have been through every 2 or 3 neurosurgeons, and they have what we term failed back syndrome. And you know the quality of life for those people are the same as for a terminal patient. You take a 22-year-old guy that's been in a motor vehicle accident, he's had 3 back surgeries, and he'd tell you he'd rather die than to live with the pain that he's got. Well, those are patients that we deal with also right there. I think for me as a practicing physician, if I saw this on prior authorization, I would probably not even consider OxyContin in my regimen and want to go to something else rather than deal with you people for that. And I think that's the background for this personally. If I were looking at it from your side, that maybe a practicing physician doesn't even look at OxyContin as a choice because of the PA, right?
I see that it says that.
And what this reflects is a fairly candid admission by Dr. Crenshaw that utilization controls and prior authorization would affect prescribing patterns, right?
What it says, Dr. Crenshaw is making that statement, if that's what you're asking me.
Correct. And what he's observing is if they do this, when he has the 22-year-old patient, he's probably not even going to consider OxyContin, right?
That appears to be the statement he made.
And what that is a reflection that things like quantity limits and prior authorization requirements impact, at least in Dr. Crenshaw's view, as a DUR board member, prescribing patterns of physicians in the state.
Pardon me, I must object. He's asking her to speculate on what this person she's never said. Now, she's already answered that it says that on a piece of paper, but she wasn't there. She doesn't know. He's asking her to speculate.
I'm asking her a question, Your Honor, about the view that Dr. Crenshaw shared with the DUR board in its January 14th, 2003 meeting about the impact of somebody who is a practicing physician, the impact of prior authorization quantity limits on a prescribing physician as presented to the board.
Now, the first question was, what does it say? She said it says that. The second question was, isn't this what Dr. Crenshaw meant? That's speculation. How would you know?
I'll sustain the objection.
Thank you.
Let me ask you to turn forward 2 further pages.
To page 16 or page 17?
16, correct. And you see at the top, there's a reference to Dr. Robinson, the DUR board member, right?
I see that.
And he asks, okay, does everyone understand the motion? Can we have the vote, please, right?
That's not the part that you have up on the screen.
Sorry, we need to go to 16 up at the top, Ms. Conway, very top. Perfect. So he asks, okay, does everyone understand the motion? And Dr. Crenshaw indicates we are not voting on the OxyContin. It is not included. I can live with that, right?
That's the words there?
And then Dr. Robinson responds after the motion to exclude OxyContin from the vote. By the way, that motion carried here, right?
It says motion carried.
And then Dr. Robinson indicates now as a board, we're going to have to respond in some way to community care regarding the narcotic analgesic OxyContin. What would this board like to do? Dr. Crenshaw moved not to include OxyContin for prior authorization, seconded by Dr. Swaim, and the motion carried, right?
I see that it says that.
All right, and let's remember that name, Dr. Swaim, because we will come back to Dr. Swaim. For now, Your Honor, I'd like to approach with another exhibit.
You may. Try to hit about a 3 o'clock break. We'll try to hit a 3 o'clock break.
Thank you.
So, Ms. White, I have handed you a copy. We're moving forward a month. Dated March 5th, 2003, the Drug Utilization Review Board packet provided to members ahead of the meeting on March 11th, 2003, right?
Yes.
And Your Honor, we offered J802 into evidence and request permission to publish.
No objection.
J802 will be admitted into the evidence and you may publish.
Thank you. And I want you to go to page 74 of this document. And let me know when you get there. We have it up on the screen as well.
Thank you.
All right, if I may approach the screen, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
So this is a Drug Enforcement Agency report that was included in the materials that were provided to DURB members in March of 2003, right?
It appears to be.
And that drug intelligence brief is actually dated March 2002, and it's on OxyContin pharmaceutical diversion, right?
That's what it says?
And in the overview, it says that abuse and diversion of the prescription pain reliever OxyContin are serious problems in certain areas of the United States, particularly in the East, right?
It says that?
And then it states that in 1996, OxyContin was introduced as a longer-lasting dosage of oxycodone, which is prescribed for the treatment of moderate to severe pain. And then DEA reports, since 1996, Drug Abuse Warning Network, DAWN, data indicate an increasing number of emergency department mentions and deaths associated with oxycodone, correct?
It says that?
And you've heard a fair amount about dawn data in the course of your time in the courtroom here, right?
Yes, I heard quite a bit about how dawn data was used by J&J and Janssen to convince doctors that there was a low abuse potential for their products, even after their KOLs told them not to use dawn data to do so.
And if you remember that much, you probably also remember that new dawn data became available after that time, don't you?
After what time?
After the time that the Scientific Advisory Board that had advised against using that dawn data gave that advice.
I know that you all tried to say that.
And you were here for that portion of the trial as well, correct?
I believe so.
And that new dawn data became available, I believe, in 2002, about the time that this drug intelligence brief from the DEA was written. Is that right?
I don't know.
And at this point in time, at least, what you do know is that the DEA was citing to dawn data in order to address the issues of abuse and diversion, correct?
This is citing to dawn data to talk about emergency department mentions and deaths.
Correct. And DEA was using dawn data to do that, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. I thought what you asked me is if it was talking about diversion, and I was saying you hadn't shown me anything that was talking about diversion in this. So I apologize, but that's what I thought you asked me.
Quite all right. And the information from DEA was presented to the Drug Utilization Review Board in March of 2003, correct?
This appears to have been included in the packet.
All right, let's skip ahead a few months to July of 2003, if I may approach again, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
And Ms. White, I've handed you a copy of a memorandum dated July 1, 2003, with the packet contents for the July 8, 2003 DURP meeting. You have that in front of you?
I do.
Your Honor, we'd offer J812 into evidence and request permission to publish.
Okay.
J812 will be admitted into the evidence and you may publish.
And Ms. White, I want to direct you to the list of packet materials. And on the first page. And there's a reference to Appendix G, review and discuss OxyContin and MS-Contin utilization, correct?
I see that.
Now, if you turn to Appendix G, I believe the title page is the 66th page of the document. And then substance starts on the next page, right? You there?
Yes.
All right. So what we see here on page 67, it's general utilization of OxyContin in the Oklahoma Medicaid population from April of 2002 to March of 2003, correct?
Through March of 2000. Wait, say that again?
April of 2002 through March of
Oh,
2003.
sorry, I was looking down at the chart. Correct, that's what it says.
And we see what the chart actually has is it has 2001 to 2002 information on number of claims, and then it has that April 2002 to March 2003 time period so that the two of them can be compared, correct?
I see both those lines.
Including a percent change calculation based on the differences, right?
I see that.
And we see an increase in the total number of persons receiving OxyContin of 12.7%, right?
That's what it says.
And 18.4% in the total number of claims.
That's what it says.
26.4% increase in the total number of units.
It doesn't say 26.4.
I think, let's see where I'm sorry, 26.8. I
That's what it says.
apologize. And there is an increase of, it looks like 3.6%, if I'm reading it correctly, in the mean number of units per day of OxyContin for those claims, right?
That's what it says.
All right, and then what follows are discussion topics. And the discussion topic there is mechanisms for control of OxyContin utilization. Do you see that?
I see that it says that.
And the first question listed is, does the board think that Oklahoma Medicaid needs to put some controls on OxyContin utilization, right?
I see that it says that.
And then they ask, if so, what mechanism does the board recommend using? And they list some of the things that we have been talking about in the course of looking through these minutes, including prior authorization, quantity limits, or a combination of prior authorization and a quantity limit, right?
I see that it says that.
All right. And Your Honor, you indicated you wanted to break around 3. We could probably do it now.
Okay. Go ahead and take a 15-minute break. Start back at 3:15. And can I have a council come up for just a brief sidebar?
So, Ms. White, we were looking at Exhibit 1520. I'm sorry, we were looking, I believe, at 812 when we left off.
I do.
And if you go a couple pages further in, you'll see there's a section on Duragesic, correct?
Further in from where, I'm sorry?
Well, the next appendix, I believe, if you turn a couple more pages, relates to Duragesic use. It's Appendix H.
Do you have a page number?
Starts on page 70. You there?
Yes.
And then we see on page 71, utilization review of Duragesic for the calendar year 2002, right?
I see that.
And it runs through various information from the drug's label. It runs through information about utilization within Medicaid. And then when we get to page 75, we see recommendations, correct?
I don't know, I've never seen this before. Do you want me to look at 71 through 75?
Well, I'm just going to focus on the ultimate recommendation. I'm not going to go through all of the data on these pages. And Ms. Conway, we can pull up page 75. And if we can pull out the recommendations. Ms. White, are you there?
No, not yet. I'm sorry. You asked me if that's what 71 through 75 did, so I was looking at 71 through 75.
Fair enough. Ms. White, I really only have one question, and that's whether the recommendations of the board at this time, based on the 2002 utilization review, or the Duragesic utilization at this time appears to be within acceptable parameters. Therefore, the college, it's College of Pharmacy, right?
Hold on just a second. I'm up to page 73. Hold on just a second. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
My question was the reference to the college there. That's the College of Pharmacy, correct?
I don't know.
The ultimate recommendation presented to the board was that the college does not recommend any changes or restrictions. Utilization should be reviewed again at a later date, correct?
It says that.
All right. Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. White, I've handed you a copy of what's been marked as Exhibit J815. This is packet contents for the board meeting of August 12th, 2003, correct?
It appears to be yes.
Your Honor, we would offer J815 into evidence and request permission to publish.
J815 will be admitted into the evidence, permission to publish.
And you see, Ms. White, that we have an agenda item, a packet content in Appendix H, which is follow-up review and discussion of OxyContin and MS Contin utilization, correct?
I see that it says that.
And that starts on page 60 and continues on the subsequent pages, correct?
All the subsequent pages?
Subsequent pages of this document until we get to Appendix I.
It appears to.
And on page 64, we see a discussion topic. And it's the same discussion topic that we've seen presented to the board in the prior one. Specifically, number one, if we can bring that out, Ms. Conway. Does the DUR board think that Oklahoma Medicaid should put controls on OxyContin utilization, right?
It says that. Excuse me, it says that.
And the difference is, in August of 2003, as opposed to July, there are various options that were presented to the board for addressing utilization of OxyContin in the Medicaid population, correct?
You're saying there were options offered here, but there weren't options in the last one?
We didn't see options set out in the prior one, as we do here, which are various options listed as A through E, and then two additional options, F and G, with no restrictions, right?
There was one that you had me read 3 options on. I don't know if that was July, but I've not seen a list that looks like this, if that's what you're asking me.
That's what I will ask you, if that's the answer.
I have no idea what that means, I'm sorry.
It means I'm willing to take that as a response and move on to the next question, which is specifically, there were 5 options presented that would have put restrictions on prescribing of OxyContin, A through E, and then 2 final options, F and G, which would have placed no restrictions on OxyContin use, if we can pull out F and G, right?
So I can read them if you want, and then tell you if the first 5 do what you say and the second 2 do what you say. I can agree with you. There are 7, it appears there are 7 recommendations here, but I've just seen this document and haven't read it yet.
Well, we can run through them. The first one is to require a PA on all OxyContin prescriptions, right?
It doesn't look like it's all. The first sentence says that, but if you read the whole thing, it doesn't look like it's all.
And then allow OxyContin prescriptions for 2 or fewer tablets per day to be paid at the pharmacy without a PA, but if more than 2 tablets daily, require a PA. That's in B, right?
It says that in B.
And on down the list through E, with varying degrees of prior authorization required under different circumstances, becoming less restrictive as we go down through the list. Before we get to what we looked at, F and G, place no restrictions on OxyContin use, correct?
I haven't read them all, but if you want me to read them, I can tell you if they go less as strict, if that's what you're asking me.
I'll tell you what, can we agree that both F and G begin by presenting the option of placing no restrictions on OxyContin use?
It does say that.
All right, let's move forward to October of 2003, if I may approach, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Oh, no, you're okay. I think for sure. Thank you.
So this is the October 8th, 2003 packet for the DUR meeting that was going to take place on October 14th, 2003, correct?
Yes, it appears to be.
And Your Honor, we offered J824 into evidence and request permission to publish.
J824 will be admitted into the evidence. You may
And-
publish.
Thank you. Ms. White, among the packet contents is an action item, review and vote on quantity limitations, see Appendix E, correct?
I see that.
And I want to turn to a portion of Appendix E on page 47. Which addresses controlled substances, correct?
Let me look, hold on just a second, I haven't seen this before. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We see a list of controlled substances with the presentation of drug, quantity limits, and comments, correct?
On page 47, correct?
Correct.
We see a list of controlled drugs. We see quantity limits, headline and a comment headline.
Right, and down toward the bottom, we see a reference to OxyContin, and right above that to oxycodone, immediate release tablets and capsules, right?
I see that.
And for the immediate release formulation, we see a quantity limit listed, 240 tablets or capsules per 30 days, correct?
I see that it says that.
Do you know by any chance whether that is more or less than 90 morphine milligram equivalents per day?
I don't know that.
All right. The next entry is the OxyContin entry, controlled release tablets, and there's an indication 90 tablets per 30 days with no quantity restriction on the 80 milligram strength, correct?
I see that it says that.
And based on the information we saw about dosing every 12 hours, that would exceed that. That would be 3 pills a day if it's 90 tablets per 30 days, correct?
That would be more than 2 pills a day, if that's what you're asking me.
Correct. That is what I'm asking. And we actually see the indication in the comments section, dose Q 12 hour, right?
I see that it says that.
All right. So let me just ask you the question. Do you think that a quantity limit that allows dosage of 3 tablets per day for 30 days, if the drug is supposed to be dosed in 12-hour increments, is inconsistent with the goal of controlling overuse of medication?
You're asking me if the goal of controlling overuse
Of medication is advanced by a quantity limit which allows doctors to prescribe 1.5 times as much of a medication as is indicated.
I don't believe any, say that last part one more time? That advances?
Do you believe it advances the goal of, let me try it this way. Just ask you this, do you think it's a good thing to allow doctors to prescribe 1.5 times the recommended dosage of a medication for a 30-day period?
Objection calls for speculation on our part.
Your Honor, she's testified extensively as to what she thinks causes of the opioid crisis.
She's not testified, she's a doctor.
I overrule the objection.
I don't feel like I can testify about what amount of a drug a doctor should prescribe. I'm a social worker and not a physician. If you're asking me, do I think the goal of ending oversupply is advanced when we advocate for no controls over prescription opioids? No, that's what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about the SWAT teams that we saw introduced into evidence earlier in this trial, where it seemed like every time a state was going to try to talk about limiting access to opioids, Johnson & Johnson would release a SWAT team to try to go down and ensure that no controls were enacted.
So is that a yes or a no? Do you think it's a good idea to allow doctors to prescribe 1.5 times as much of the drug as is indicated?
John, I object. She answered the question. She doesn't have to answer yes or no to that question.
Your Honor, she didn't answer the question. She answered a question that wasn't posed to her and commented on actions of the
I sustain the
defendants.
objection. Asked and answered.
Thank you. If I may approach, Your Honor.
Yes.
Ms. White, we're moving forward into 2004.
Thank you.
And this is a Drug Utilization Review Board packet for the March 9th, 2004 meeting, correct?
Yes, it appears to be.
And Your Honor, we offer J832 and request permission to publish.
Objection.
J832 will be admitted into the evidence. Permission to publish granted.
Thank you. And Ms. White, one of the things that was presented to the DUR board for its March 9th, 2004 meeting were FDA and DEA updates, which were included as Appendix H to the meeting packet, correct?
I see that.
And I just want to talk about a little bit of the information that was reported to the board. And if you could turn to page 46 for me. On reducing prescription drug abuse. Bless you.
Thank you.
You there?
I am.
And you'll see, this is a section reducing prescription drug abuse, right?
That's the title?
And one of the things that was presented to the board was information about investigation and enforcement, correct?
What do you mean specifically? I'm sorry.
You see the section on investigation and enforcement.
Yes, I see those words.
And one of the things that was reported was that at this time in 2004, the internet was becoming a concern as one of the most popular sources of diverted prescription drugs, correct?
It says that?
And what the board was presented with was information telling the board that an increasing number of rogue pharmacies or pill mills were offering controlled substances and other prescriptions direct to consumers online at this time, correct?
It says that. I think one of the important things to remember is that we heard testimony that we did not have significant pill mill issues in the state of Oklahoma, that unfortunately what we had in the state of Oklahoma was a large number of physicians who were marketed to, who were prescribing these drugs, we didn't have the same type of pill mill, not to say we had none. We didn't have the same type of pill mills that other states had. I believe the example that was given at the time during the testimony was Florida. That what we had in Oklahoma, because I believe this appears to be nationally specific, what we had in Oklahoma very specifically was a large number of physicians who had been convinced that opioids needed to be prescribed for untreated pain and that they carried a low risk of abuse.
Well, we're going to talk about pill mills in a little bit here. Before we do, I want to march through a couple more of these meeting packets. And if I may approach, Your Honor, I want to get 895.
Yes, you may.
Sorry.
And before I get to this, Ms. White, you are not denying that the availability of drugs via the internet through rogue pill mills is something that has been a problem. Are you?
I'm not denying that that's what this document from the DEA said. What I was talking about is the fact that the testimony given in court thus far talks about the fact that pill mills was not the significant problem in the state of Oklahoma.
Well, let me ask you this, Ms. White. Did you take a look at the extent to which the availability of illicit drugs on the internet was an issue in Oklahoma as you prepared to give opinions on the causes of the opioid crisis in the state?
I talked with many people about the issue of illicit drugs in Oklahoma, and specifically, as you've heard testimony given by multiple people in this case so far, including experts, illicit opioids is not the significant problem in the state, although it is rising, and it is rising. And again, I think this is a really important piece to understand, because I feel like I've said this several times, but based on your questions, I'm not sure if I'm being clear, that when the rise in prescription opioid sales occurred, when something of that magnitude happens, it is inevitable that there will be a switch to when the addiction circuitry is turned on. And as you heard in the testimony of Mr. McGregor and others, when the addiction circuitry is turned on and you can no longer afford a prescription medication, which is expensive, and you can buy illicit opioids at a much less expensive price on the street, that shift is inevitable. But the discussion specifically has been that as a result of the rise in the oversupply and overprescribing of prescription opioids. So I absolutely think that there is an illicit problem growing in the state of Oklahoma, but I believe it is tied to the oversupply and overprescribing that began of prescription opioids.
Well, let's talk about illicit drugs. We saw the 2003 OBN annual report, which included information about methamphetamine labs. Do you recall that?
I did see that.
And I want to, if I may, do we have 3928? If I may approach, Your Honor.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, one of the things you talked about this morning was NAS, correct?
I did talk about NAS.
And we have seen what has been marked as Courts Exhibit 56. I want to go with the state's version of this, Ms. Conway. You recognize this chart, correct?
I do.
All right. And now I want you to take a look at what we have marked as Exhibit 3928. Correct? You have that in front of you?
I do.
And if you would, and Your Honor, if we can bring this up on the screen.
Yes.
I'd like you to turn to page 9 of Exhibit 3928.
you say page 9?
Page 9, correct? It's most common substances by year of death, Oklahoma, 2007 to 2017. You there?
Yes, I am.
And you heard testimony, I believe, from Ms. Nguyen regarding this chart, right?
I did.
And I don't know if you were here or not when Dr. Pfeiffer was questioned about this chart.
I believe I was here for part of Dr. Pfeiffer's testimony. I don't believe I was here for all of his testimony.
Okay, but what this shows is the most common substances by year of death for the various substances that we see listed on the left side of this chart, correct?
Yes.
And we see hydrocodone, oxycodone, on down. We have fentanyl on this list, alcohol, and we also see methamphetamines, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now, you were also here, I believe, yesterday when we looked at J625, which was a printout from the query system that is maintained by your department, correct?
Yes.
And if I may approach
I
you.
mean, I don't know if that's what
You may.
625 is, but I was here when you...
I understand. I don't know most of them by number either. And this is something that you have seen before, correct?
Yes.
It's in evidence, Your Honor. Permission to publish.
Yes, you may.
And this is a printout from the query system by primary drug of choice, right?
Primary drug of choice is what is checked here.
And you were here yesterday when we ran through a series of court exhibits that showed year by year how admissions as tracked by the query system had changed year over year for different substances, right?
Yes.
All right. So what we did is we took court exhibit 56 and we took the information on overdose deaths from exhibit 3928, the year by year number of overdose deaths. And we also took the number of treatment admissions by substance. And if I may approach, Your Honor, we charted them against Court Exhibit 56. We request permission to publish that, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No, we're not. Looking forward to it.
Permission to publish.
And if I may approach, Your Honor.
Yes.
So what you'll see here, Ms. White, is this is Court Exhibit 56, which is charted on the scale 0 to 500 on the left side here, right?
Yes.
And then the green line here represents methamphetamine deaths year by year as they are pulled together by Ms. Nguyen's office in Exhibit 3928. You see that?
Yes.
And what the blue line represents is the number of admissions for methamphetamine against the scale on the right side here, 0 to 6,000. You see that?
I see that it says that.
And what we see is at a time when opioid use measured by MMEs via the publicly available ARCOS data and opioid overdose deaths have been going down, methamphetamine admissions and methamphetamine deaths have been going up, correct?
Correct.
Now, you understand that the ICD-9 and ICD-10 codes that underlie the calculation of the number of deaths in this chart include all NAS babies, I'm sorry, not NAS deaths, NAS births, include all NAS births, not just opioid-related NAS births, correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So the data that underlies the red lines here on the chart, right,
Yes.
is based on ICD-9 and ICD-10 codes, which are charted within the healthcare authority's Sooner Care program, correct?
I can't speak to if they based it on ICD-9 or ICD-10, but I could look and see, but I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay, do we have 4054? We don't have a copy. States 4054 is in evidence already, and States 4054 is the source for the data here that was depicted by the state in Court Exhibit 56. And I'll represent to you, we can pull a copy, and you're welcome to take a look at it as soon as we can get it printed, that it is based on charting by different ICD-9 and ICD-10 codes that are used in the Medicaid system. You know what an ICD-9 and ICD-10 code is, correct?
Yes, I do.
And those are codes that are used by anybody making a claim who provides treatment, medical service to a patient. There's a code associated with what is provided that is then used and associated with a claim for reimbursement, correct?
I'm sorry, Your Honor. What part of that question was not printed out yet, that we could get it printed out?
States 4054 is the exhibit on which, and there should be no dispute, Mr. Whitman, that this is the basis for 4054 is the basis for this chart.
Okay. I'm just really kind of asking the witness if she needs to see that exhibit or if she should operate by memory, but I guess it's up to the witness.
Are you representing that States 4054 is exactly what we're seeing without the blue and the green line?
State 4054 was the basis, was represented to be the basis for Court's Exhibit 56. And if you look at Court's Exhibit 56, the numbers on the chart on States 4054 match Court's Exhibit 56.
I think we should take a minute and just get it out and let
Sure.
the witness see it.
Sure, can we print it? All right, let's do it that way. We do that way, Your Honor?
Yes.
We'll bring it up.
Thank you.
And it's the next page. If we blow this up, Ms. Conway? And you see here, number of infants by diagnosis code, correct?
I see that.
And here we see the diagnosis codes that these numbers, which run from 9 in 1996. I believe you referenced the 9, excuse me, in your testimony this morning.
I don't believe I did. I believe Ms. Hawkins referenced it yesterday.
That's a figure you're familiar with, correct?
Yes.
And it runs all the way up, excuse me, to 498 in 2017, right?
I see that.
All right, if we can go back to our demonstrative. And there we see, excuse me, the 2017 bar running up to just about 500, right?
Correct.
And so my question is, you understand that the codes that this data, these bars are based on, are not limited to NAS births related to exposure to opioids, right?
So what you just showed me were on the top of that chart were numbers. Are you representing those numbers or the ICD-9 and the ICD-10 codes? Is that what you're asking me?
Correct. And my question is, do you understand that those ICD-9 and 10 codes that form the basis for this chart include more than simply NAS births that are associated with opioid medications?
I'd need to look at those codes to be sure.
Your Honor, I
Now-
want to interpose an objection here. If I'm understanding him correctly, he seems to be inferring that methamphetamine causes neonatal abstinence syndrome, which we all know it does not, so I object.
Well, my question simply, Your Honor, is we can see that the number of NAS births in the Sonicare system in Oklahoma tracks methamphetamine deaths and methamphetamine treatment admissions during the time period in which they have risen dramatically, don't they?
That still makes my point. They're not related. Meth can't cause neonatal abstinence syndrome, and even though my friend Steve seems to be doing all the testifying, he's not an expert on this, and so I object.
All right, overrule the objection.
And the question
Are you
was,
just asking me if those lines go the same direction? Or are you asking me if the lines are related?
I'm asking you if we see a rise in NAS births in the Sonicare system. At the same time, we've seen a dramatic rise in Oklahoma of methamphetamine overdose deaths and treatment admissions within your department where the primary drug is methamphetamine.
And you're just asking me if they're going the same direction during that time, not if they're related. That's what I'm trying to make sure before I answer the question.
That's right.
They are going the same direction.
And by asking me for that clarification, I suspect you were going to point out that correlation does not necessarily mean causation, right?
That was not what I was thinking in my head.
All right, but do you recognize that correlation is not causation?
I'm not saying that. In fact, I haven't been able to say much of anything yet. What I was asking is, are you asking me if they follow the same line, or are you asking me if they're related? And if
I'm asking you if
I wasn't done, I'm so sorry.
Pardon me. I don't believe the witness, I don't think he did this on purpose, but I don't believe the witness was finished. I think she was trying to,
Correct, I was not.
okay.
I'm happy to let her finish, and I
Go
apologize.
ahead,
Right?
finish your answer.
Thank you. What I was asking is if he was asking, are they going the same direction or are they related? And I was asking that question very specifically, not for the reason that he is assuming I was asking, but because methamphetamine rarely causes neonatal abstinence syndrome. It is very uncommon. The vast majority of neonatal abstinence syndrome is caused by opioids, regardless of what any other drug trend line is doing. Given that you're asking me about the methamphetamine drug trend line, though, I think it's incredibly important that the court understand that when we realized there was an opioid crisis and we started taking measures such as using the prescribing guidelines and other things to decrease the availability of prescription opioids, when the addiction circuitry in the brain is turned on, it's on. And people will use what they can get their hands on at that point once they're already addicted. So if you can't access prescription drugs anymore because either you can't get them prescribed because of the prescribing guidelines and other efforts we were taking to abate the crisis, or because you can't afford them, people will often turn to illicit opioids. Also available in Oklahoma, growing at this time, was inexpensive methamphetamine. And when your addiction circuitry has already been turned on by a prescription drug and you can't get that, and what is available and what is cheap is methamphetamine, you will absolutely see a rise in methamphetamine use. Methamphetamine rarely again causes NAS, but absolutely the rise in methamphetamine use is correlated, going back to your question, in the turning on of addiction circuitry due to prescription drugs. And that's a really important point that I do not believe has been pointed out to the court thus far. And I appreciate you putting up this chart so I could discuss it.
So are you saying, as an expert in this one, that correlation and causation are the same thing?
I wasn't testifying whether correlation or causation was the same thing. I was talking specifically about what you put on the chart about methamphetamine and NAS.
Well, the reason I asked is because my question to you before the lengthy answer you just gave was whether, as an expert, you believe that you understand that correlation and causation are different things.
That is correct. They are different things.
All right, thank you. And we do know on that subject that during this time period where we've seen an increase in NAS births as measured by the ICD-9 and 10 codes that underlie this data, that opioid overdose deaths and opioid use in the state of Oklahoma has gone down, right?
Say the first part about ICD-9 and ICD-10 codes again.
I said we do know that for the time period where we have seen an increase in NAS births based on the ICD-9 and 10 codes that were utilized to pull this data together, we have seen opioid overdose deaths and opioid use in the state of Oklahoma go down roughly since 2013, correct?
Opioid deaths have gone down. Opioid prescriptions have gone down. But when you say use, I want to make sure I understand what you're referring to.
I'm referring to the data that has been presented repeatedly by the state in the chart we have seen throughout the trial, which measures opioid use by MME shipments based on the publicly available ARCOS data.
Are you talking about the Oklahoma-fied chart with the blue bars and the yellow line?
That's the one.
So what that chart is looking at is not use. That chart is looking at the sale of prescription opioids and opioid overdose deaths. That's why I asked specifically what you meant by use.
Actually, it's looking at shipments of opioids, correct?
The blue and yellow chart?
Correct. ARCOS tracks shipments, doesn't it?
I'd have to look.
You're not familiar with what's contained in the data that underlies that?
I am familiar with what was contained in the data, and I believe it's representative of sales. I'll have to look to see when you say shipment exactly what it says.
All right, may I approach Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you.
And we're up to 2005 now, Ms. White, and you see a change in the format of the cover page for the DUR packets, right?
I do.
And this is the packet for the April 12th, 2005 meeting, right?
I believe so.
Your Honor will offer J895 and request permission to publish.
No objection, Your Honor.
J895 will be admitted into the evidence and you may publish.
And if you turn to the second page, you'll see the closures.
Yes.
And Appendix G is review and discuss selected narcotic drug utilization, right?
That's what it says.
And if you turn to page 35, that's where Appendix G begins.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
35.
35, thank you.
And the section on OxyContin begins on page 38. You there?
Not quite yet. I was trying to look at what this section was. I hadn't seen this document before. Yes.
And if you look down, there's a reference to the current quantity limit for OxyContin. If we can pull that out, Ms. Conway. You see that?
Yes.
And at this time, there's an indication that the first 60 days of therapy are excluded for dose adjustment, and then 90 tablets per 30 days thereafter, right?
I see that it says that.
And then there's a recommended quantity limit, and we see the indication that the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority has not been able to put into place the programming which would allow the first 60 days of therapy to pay without quantity limits. Therefore, there is no quantity limit currently being applied to this drug. You see that?
I see that it says that.
All right, and in the course of your work of preparing to offer expert opinions on causes of the opioid crisis, did you do any review of the lack of quantity limits that were placed on OxyContin by OHCA as late as the middle of 2005?
I did not review these packets before today, but as I sit here, what I've seen is some of the things we've already talked about, which is the fact that J&J was present at almost every meeting that we've seen, that documents are referenced, that I believe we've talked about, and in fact, if I can put up, because I can see it right there, if I
Yeah,
can
they
put
turned it
up-
around at the break because they wanted you to be able to see it.
You interrupted, Your Honor, I object. She was right in the middle of a sentence. Can she finish it? Dave,
Yeah, Your Honor, I
Can
mean,
she finish?
she's not answering the question.
That doesn't give him the right to interrupt.
Well, I'll let Ms. White finish her answer, and then if you want to object to the non-responsiveness, you can.
If I can show the chart that I've asked to put up that I think will demonstrate exactly what I'm talking about the influence of J&J and Janssen on these processes in Oklahoma, yes, I believe I did address this and would like to talk about it and show you what I'm talking about in my preparation for today.
That's because you looked at an internal document related to the anticipated marketing of Nucynta, and ignored review of actions that were taken and considerations that were made by the Drug Utilization Review Board. Fair?
No, I don't believe that's fair.
Well, did you look at the Drug Utilization Review Board minutes?
I did not look at the Drug Utilization Review Board minutes.
Did you look at actions that were considered and not taken by the Drug Utilization Review Board, even as it was receiving information about abuse and diversion of OxyContin?
I did look very specifically at the fact that the Drug Utilization Review Board is not a deciding body, as we talked about earlier, but you have focused on multiple times the DUR reports. The DUR reports are a voluntary board with no authority to make decisions around Medicaid policy in the state of Oklahoma. So I did not spend a lot of time on DUR board reports. I looked at multiple things, including documents that I saw during testimony of this trial that would indicate, if I could show you, because I've asked several times, the influence that has been had on the medical community, the law enforcement community, and multiple entities in the state of Oklahoma that I think is very relevant to causation. But no, I did not review the minutes of the DUR board, which does not make any of these decisions.
And you understand that the DUR board is legally required to conduct prospective and retrospective utilization review of prescription medications within the Medicaid population in the state of Oklahoma, correct?
Absolutely, and I think that's a really incredible, important point, because what the DUR board
I'm
is...
sorry, Ms. White, Your Honor, the
Pardon me?
question was simply about what the board does. And if I ask a question like that, it cannot be a platform for Ms. White to say whatever she wants. We have to have some level of responsiveness to these questions. I mean, this examination is going to extend through the week if every question is a platform for Ms. White to say whatever she wants to say.
May I respond to that? As long as I've been practicing law, the rules are that he asks the question, the witness answers, and finishes the answer, and then he can object on responsiveness in the working rule. But I didn't even get to hear, nor did you, Your Honor, the full answer. So I don't know how anybody can judge responsiveness, and he very rudely interrupted the witness again.
I think your question started with, do you understand? And there were some other things, and what I'd like for is Commissioner White to answer And I will certainly listen if you believe that it's not responsive, and I'll entertain a motion to strike or something like that accordingly.
Thank you, Your Honor. The question, Ms. White, was simply if you understand that the DUR board is legally obligated to conduct prospective and retrospective review of utilization of prescription drugs within the Medicaid population.
I do understand that, and the answer I was trying to give is that the DUR retrospective review is very specifically a review of the prescriptions prescribed by physicians in the Medicaid program the previous year. And to the extent that those prescriptions have been increasing or influenced, that would show up. And the DUR board is forced by statute to then review that increase in prescriptions and consider it in their decisions. And I think that's a really important point when he asks about DUR retrospective reviews, to understand exactly how that works and what that means.
And what we have seen is when they were doing those reviews in 2000, in 2001, in 2002, in 2003, in 2004, and in 2005, that there was a consistent focus on abuse, diversion, and increased prescribing of OxyContin, correct?
We have seen in the retrospective reviews that there, I'm sorry, say it one more time.
We have seen in the reviews of the DUR materials, including their review of utilization, starting in 2000 and up through where we are right now, 2005, a consistent recognition of abuse and diversion and increased prescribing of OxyContin. That's the first question, right?
We saw an increase in prescribing of OxyContin in the Medicaid program during that time, absolutely.
And we have seen year after year after year consideration by the DUR board of whether to make recommendations to address the level of prescribing of OxyContin, including the number of pills that doctors were prescribing with each 30-day prescription for the drug, right?
There were multiple discussions that you showed me in the DUR packet around the issue of pill limits and other things as we discussed, and everything that that means.
And notwithstanding all of that discussion, as we see here, we're up to April of 2005. OHCA has not been able to put in place the programming which would allow the first 60 days of therapy to pay without quantity limits. Therefore, there is no quantity limit currently being applied to this drug. And we have seen that consistently throughout all of the meeting minutes that we have reviewed, correct?
That's what this says.
And that has been the case every time we've seen the DUR board consider this issue, hasn't it?
I believe that is true.
So let's talk about the PMP a little bit more. And if I may approach, Your Honor,
Yes.
with 217.
Thank you.
And I've handed you a copy of what's been marked as Exhibit J217. Do you have that in front of you?
I do.
And this is an email from a Daryl Weaver to a Portia McNeil, right?
Yes, it appears to be.
And it's forwarding a strategic threat summary from John Duncan, right?
It appears to be.
And that's the same Dr. Duncan whose testimony and CV we saw at the outset of my examination earlier, before lunch, right?
I assume so.
And so, as we talked about earlier, OSTAR was created in 1990, correct?
I believe that's correct.
And so OSTAR had been in place for the entire 16 years or so, focusing on the last 6 that we've covered so far today.
We've had a PMP in place for,
I'm focusing on OSTAR as opposed to the current PMP.
okay. So say that again?
So OSTAR was in place during the entire time period we have been covering in my questions to you today, right?
The entire time period? No, I don't believe that.
From 1990 right up through 2005, which was the last set of minutes we looked at.
I know that when we were here earlier today, you asked me if there was a switch to a system in 2006, and I told you I didn't know if that was the year. So I don't know how to answer that because I didn't know that.
All right, well, let's take a look. And Your Honor, we would offer 217 into evidence that was produced by the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics.
J 217 will be admitted into the evidence and you may publish.
Thank you. And you see this is a fiscal year 2008 to 2012 strategic plan for the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs Control, right?
Correct.
And Ms. Conway, if we go to the second page, you'll see date filed September 22nd, 2006. There?
I see that.
And I want to
Did you
focus.
say 22nd? Or did you say second?
September 22nd,
Yes.
2006.
Yes.
And if you would, please turn to the 7th page of the document. And I want you to focus on, excuse me, the heading diversion. And you see there,
Sorry, I haven't seen this before, so I'm trying to catch up. Give me just a minute, please. Are you there? I am.
And we see in this planning document from OBN the recognition that a persistent problem as of September of 2006 in Oklahoma is the diversion of legitimate pharmaceutical drugs to illicit use. You see that?
I see that it says that.
And that paragraph goes on to talk about the development of the OSTAR system. And it indicates that in 1990, Oklahoma developed the first system to electronically track Schedule II controlled drugs, such as morphine, oxycodone, and amphetamines, right?
I see that.
And we see there what the acronym OSTAR is for, the Oklahoma Schedule II Abuse Reduction Project, right?
I see that.
But OBN recognized that a weakness, or the weakness of OSTAR, was that it only tracked Schedule II controlled drugs, right?
It says that.
And it indicates consequently hydrocodone, a powerful pain drug that is Schedule III, and many drugs in Schedules 4 and 5 were never tracked and continued to be abused in record numbers. You see that?
I see that it says that.
And OBN indicated that hydrocodone remains the most abused pharmaceutical drug in Oklahoma, right?
I see that.
And that OxyContin, methadone, and other opiates are also frequently abused and commonly result in overdose deaths, right?
I see that it says that.
So the O-Star system that was in use beginning in 1990 did not track what OBN identified as the most abused pharmaceutical drug in Oklahoma, did it?
That's what this says.
And there were other limitations associated with the O-Star system, weren't there?
Do you have a specific that you're asking me about?
Well, one weakness of the system was that doctors did not have the ability to check O-Star, did they?
I don't know. In 1990, I was in high school. I don't know. I'm sorry.
In 2005.
2005. They had no ability, you're saying they had no ability to get information out of O-Star in 2005?
To check O-Star in 2005 if they were writing a prescription for an opioid patient.
For any information in it?
They couldn't go to the system, look it up, say, gosh, this patient has seen 3 doctors in the last week and a half and gotten OxyContin prescriptions. I better not prescribe it. They didn't have, the O-Star system did not give them the ability to do that, did it? As of 2005.
I don't know.
Not something you looked at in forming your opinions on causes of the opioid crisis in Oklahoma?
I did not look at that piece.
All right. We see a reference here to the prescription monitoring program if we go down to the next paragraph. And we see that in 2004, the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics received legislative authority to expand O-Star and rename the new system to the Control Program, or Comprehensive Oklahoma Narcotics Tracking and Record Online, right?
I see that.
And if you go a couple sentences further, you see that OBNDD began the prescription monitoring program and the control program on July 1st of 2006, correct?
I see that.
All right. And that was intended to address some of what the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics had identified as deficiencies in the O-Star system, wasn't it?
I can't speak to if it was intended to do that or not.
You know that today, doctors via the PMP system do have the ability to do what I just referenced, which is when they are writing a prescription for an opioid medication to check the PMP, right?
They are required to.
And in fact, as of 2015, they are required to do that, right?
Correct.
And we'll come back to that. Now, we're in the 2006 period, and if I may approach, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Ms. White, I've handed you a copy of what we've marked as Exhibit J218. This is an Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics ACES investigative supplement, right?
Yes, I believe so.
And while this is dated September 25th, 2014, what it does is summarize an occurrence dated July 28th, 2007, right?
It appears to be.
And the description of the primary information is that it's a medical board report on undercover operation, correct?
That's what the description says.
All right, and Your Honor, we'd offer J218 into evidence. It was produced by the Attorney General's office in this case and request permission to publish.
J218 will be admitted into the evidence, and you may publish.
Can I ask you a question? Are those patient names? I don't know, I haven't seen it before.
Maybe you can ask the question to Mr. Brody, I don't know.
Does this document contain patient names?
This document does not contain patient names. To my recollection, it does contain names of investigators, however.
Can I show you something to ask you that question? Do you mind?
I don't mind at all, because if there's something we can redact, I'm happy to redact it before I...
I just have never seen this before, and I just want to make
Nope,
sure.
no problem at all.
Can I show you something? Okay. So what this saying is, it says medical clinic, and this says person.
Yeah, they work there.
So these are not patients? Okay.
No, these are the employees of the clinic.
Good on that.
Thank you.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
And I want to ask you about this report. If you turn to page 4, there's a brief summary of the medical board report on the undercover operation. Okay? It's the only thing on page 4. You there?
Yeah, I was reading it. You asked me if it was a summary, so I was just going to, the investigation, so I was just reading it real quickly to see if that's what it was.
And that summary indicates that in July of 2007, the Oklahoma Board of Medical Licensure and Supervision conducted an undercover operation at the Wellness Clinic in Roland, Sequoyah County, Oklahoma. The subject of the investigation was Dr. Ronald Myers, and it indicates attached is Medical Board Investigator Jana Lane's report of investigation. You see that?
That's what it says?
And if you go to page 6, we have a report of the investigation of Dr. Myers. You see that?
I see that.
And there's an indication, if we can pull out the summary, Ms. Conway. The investigator reported that, I believe it's she and Robert Duvall drove to Dr. Myers' clinic in Roland, Oklahoma. She indicates my preset appointment for a new patient visit was set for 1:50 p.m. I arrived at 1:30. Investigator Duvall sat in the car. I checked in and the receptionist gave me paperwork to fill out. She did not ask for my identification. She asked if I had brought my medical records. I told her I did not, but that I had brought a copy of my pharmacy printout for the last year. She took the $160 cash Bobby Tidwell gave me and wrote me a receipt. There was a sign that said all new patients had to show their driver's license or their identification. The girl never asked for mine. You see that?
I do.
So the investigator reported that there was no request for either ID or medical records upon arriving at the clinic for the first time, right?
That's what it says?
And so what the investigator did, if we go to the next paragraph, she turned on a digital recorder in her purse. There were other patients in the waiting room. And the investigator wrote in her report that 2 patients did not appear to have any physically wrong with them. I think she meant anything. Do you see that?
I do.
It was about 80 degrees, she reported, in the waiting room, and the staff continually went in and out the front door to smoke. You see that?
I do.
And a sign note on the wall, which she transcribed here in the report. To all patients, you will need to have a family member write a short letter to your doctor stating that your pain medication is doing you well and that it is not over sedating you. And there's a thank you from Dr. Myers and Dr. Tugis, right?
I see that.
And then if we go to the next page, we see that a patient in the waiting room asked the receptionist what the sign was for. She replied that the medical board had been coming around, so they needed for every patient to have their family members write a letter to put in the patient's file, right?
I see that.
Do you know how long the medical board had been coming around Dr. Meyer's clinic as of July of 2007?
I don't think I've seen anything that tells me that.
All right, not something you looked at in the course of your preparation to offer expert opinion in this case?
This particular one investigation, no, I did not look at this.
And you didn't look into how long the medical board had been coming around Dr. Meyer's clinic prior to this time, did you?
No, I did not.
Did you look at whether the medical board, after this occurrence that's described here, told Jansen about the events that are described in Exhibit 217?
Are you asking me if I
218.
if I looked at this and I said no, and then you're asking me if I then looked to see if the medical board did something with this?
Well, let me ask you this. Did anyone from the state of Oklahoma come to Jansen in July of 2007 and express any concerns with Dr. Myers' prescribing?
I don't know.
All right, not something you looked at. Right?
You're asking me if I looked to see if anyone in the state of Oklahoma came to you about this case that I told you I didn't look at.
To advise of concerns with Dr. Myers' prescribing practices.
I did not look to see if anyone in the state of Oklahoma did that.
All right. The report continues. Another new patient came in while I was waiting. The receptionist gave her the paperwork to fill out. The new patient did have her medical records. The patient asked the receptionist if the receptionist would like to make a copy of her driver's license. The receptionist told her not to worry about it on this visit because the toner on the copier was low, right?
I see that.
And skipping forward a bit, if you go down to the paragraph that starts at 2:55 p.m., the investigator writes, at 2:55 p.m. I was taken into a room with a massage table, an empty desk with a chair, a side table with a chair, and some magazines. The girl left the door open. About 5 minutes later, the girl moved me to the room next door that looked the same as the first room. I was in there for another 5 minutes or so, and then I was told to go into the next room. And that was, she reports, Dr. Myers' office, right?
That's what it says?
And she explains that it was an office, not an exam room, doesn't she?
It says that?
No exam table, just a large desk, chair, 2 chairs opposite the desk.
It says that?
Now, if we go down to the bottom of the page, we see that Dr. Myers asked the investigator if she was a new patient and if she had her medical records with her, right?
I see that.
And she reported that she did not have her medical records, just a pharmacy printout.
I see that.
And Dr. Myers, she reports, said to her, well, that's not going to help, and asked if she had back pain, if we can bring that out, Ms. Conway. And he responded, now listen to me, real simple, don't complicate things, do you have back pain? And she reports, she said yes, explained where the pain was, said she hadn't seen her doctor since May of the prior year, and then told him she didn't have x-rays or an MRI because she didn't have insurance and didn't have the money to spend on it, right?
I see that.
And with that information, Dr. Myers told her that she had chronic upper back and neck pain, right?
I see that.
And if we skip down a couple more paragraphs, he said he would give her Lorset. You understand what Lorset is, right?
Sorry, hold on. I don't, I'm sorry.
So you're not aware that Lorset is a hydrocodone acetaminophen combination?
I would not have been able to tell you that. I would have told you it was likely an opioid, but no, I would not have been able to tell you that.
Have you heard of Lortab?
Yes.
Okay. Similar to Lortab, but with the CET set, meaning it's an acetaminophen combination drug.
Thank you.
And you see the indication, he gave me a prescription for Lorset 10-650, one by mouth every 6 hours as needed with no refills. He also gave me a prescription for Flexeril 10 milligram, one by mouth 3 times a day as needed with 3 refills. I was in his room for a total of 6 minutes and 30 seconds. And the investigator continues on that she returned to the reception area and was told she could return in 2 weeks if she had her medical records, and that the cost would be $40 if she wanted 2 weeks of medication, or $80 if she wanted a month's worth of medication, right?
I see that.
All right. Do you know whether any follow-up occurred after this report was submitted?
I can't tell from this.
And do you know whether any action was taken against Dr. Myers based on this report?
I can't tell from this.
All right, well, let's move forward in this story a few years later, 2015, and if I can have 3921. If I may approach, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Mr. Whitten, this is a portion of Exhibit 3921. It's a voluminous exhibit. Don't think we need to offer the entire exhibit. These were produced by the state on May 17, 2019, is my understanding.
This is just part of 3921?
Exactly. It's a bulk exhibit, materials that the state was ordered to produce and produced on the 17th of May.
You know, Your Honor, I would object. I think the whole thing should be admitted, but I don't have a problem with him displaying a smaller version of it. But the rule of the purpose, I think the whole exhibit is to be introduced.
Your Honor, I'm happy to talk to Mr. Whitten about the best way to do that as we address it with court at the end of the day today. For now, if we can mark this as 3921A for purposes of the record, and then we can deal with what's going to come in at the conclusion of the day.
Well, as long as he's offering the whole thing, I don't have a problem getting it later, just as long as he's offering the whole thing. And I don't have an objection to him marking this as 39A. We could do that later, but I think under the rule of completion, the whole exhibit needs to come in.
I will admit Exhibit 3921A, which appears to be a 11-page report of an investigation, and I will take up the matter of omitting the entire exhibit until later on.
Thank you. May we publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
And Ms. White, this is a document produced by the state in this case. And Mr. Whitten, I will note that this was marked highly confidential, attorney's eyes only. And before we march through it, I know you all said you didn't have any confidentiality issues associated with exhibits, but I just want to make sure.
You're actually talking to the wrong guy. I didn't say that. Who did you talk to?
But we had a time frame on confidentiality and raising confidentiality issues with the court. We raised various things pre-trial.
I was just wondering which one of our lawyers you talked to, because it wasn't me.
I'm not sure.
Are you referring to during the course of discovery?
No,
Or
in
was this
the
brought up at
pre-trial,
pre-trial?
in the pre-trial phase, we brought a motion for confidentiality. Just before we run through this, Your Honor, I just want to be sure, since it,
I don't think the state had any objections to, or any concerns about confidentiality of any records that I recall.
No, I don't think they did either, Your Honor, but before we march into this, I just wanted to be sure.
That's probably right, I just wasn't.
Well, let's go ahead and publish.
All right, thank you. So, Ms. White, you see this is a report of investigation for State of Oklahoma Medicare Part D related to Dr. George Howell. You see that?
I see that.
And it's dated October 8th, 2013, correct?
I see that.
And if you look at the second page, it's being conducted by Express Scripts, is that right?
It appears to be.
And you understand that Express Scripts is a pharmacy benefits manager that the state of Oklahoma contracted with in the 2013 time period for Medicare Part D.
Does it say that here?
No, I'm just asking if you're aware of that.
I don't know that I can do that.
All right, well, let's look at the summary that Express Scripts provided as part of its investigation in connection with the Medicare Part D program. By the way, if you turn back to Exhibit 218, J218, which was the investigative report, and you look at the first page, you see on location occurred.
I'm sorry, where on the first page?
Right in the middle of the first page, address number 1, location occurred number 1.
Oh, sorry, I was not reading the headings. Yes, I see location occurred number 1. Yes, I apologize.
And there's an indication of related subjects, right?
Location related.
And that's where the names are that you asked me about before, right?
Oh, it says related subjects. Is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
Yes.
And those are the names that you asked me about. You wanted to be sure they weren't patients, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you see the name George Howell there?
I do.
All right. And that is the name that appeared to George Howell on J3921A, correct?
I see that.
All right. Now, turning back to the executive summary, we see the indication that Express Scripts, this is in the second paragraph, reviewed the claims profile of Dr. Howell, and it was found that 66% of the medications issued are for controlled substance medications, with 45% of those being Schedule II medications, right?
I see that.
And there's an indication that it was found that Dr. Howell frequently prescribes a combination of medication known as the Houston cocktail, a combination of medications that, when taken together, simulate the effects of heroin. You see that?
I see that.
And there's an indication that the evidence suggested during the investigation suggests that Dr. Howell is prescribing controlled substance medications in excess and or without medical necessity, right?
I see that.
And if you turn to page 4, there is a chart that breaks down the top 10 medications issued by Dr. Howell, correct?
I was looking for a title. Yes, I see that.
And included there oxycodone, methadone, there's an oxycodone acetaminophen combination, oxycodone 15 milligram, oxycodone 100 milligram, oxycontin 80 milligram among the medications that were being prescribed, correct?
I see that.
And if you look at the statistics in that chart, if we can keep the chart up there. We look at, and we can see there's a count of prescriptions, percentage of claims, and average tabs per prescription, right?
I see that.
as well as average days per prescription, right?
I see that.
And for 13.59% of all claims, the oxycodone HCl 30 milligram tablets. You see that?
Yes.
The average number of tablets per prescription was 164, right?
It says that?
And the average days per prescription was 27.95, correct?
It says that?
And so if we do the math, we're talking about more than 5 30 milligram tablets a day on average, correct?
I believe that would be the case, yes.
Now, if you turn forward to page 7 for me, please. And I want you to look at the bottom. And the last bullet on that page, if we can bring that out, Ms. Conway. We see an indication when reviewing the history of other physicians at the wellness clinic of Roland, Express Scripts found that another physician in the practice was previously being reviewed by the DEA, right?
I see that.
And we see a reference there to Dr. Myers, don't we?
It says Dr. Ronald Myers.
And it indicates that Dr. Myers was being reviewed by the DEA, correct?
It says that.
And then there's a table there that includes the trend of prescriptions for Dr. Howell and Dr. Myers, right?
I think so. I was just trying to figure out what the letters on the bottom were.
Well, there's an explanation right below in a bullet that explains what Express Scripts is attempting to exhibit with the table. And if we can bring that out, Ms. Conway. And we see the indication that the table exhibits that Dr. Howell and Dr. Myers alternated prescribing trends over the 5-year period in the graph. And the exchange appeared to begin in January 2010, the year Dr. Howell was licensed in Oklahoma. And with the DEA's speculation surrounding Dr. Myers' prescribing, it is possible that Dr. Howell was brought on staff in order to alleviate the suspicion of Dr. Myers. You see that?
Yeah. I don't see any years on the chart, and I'm assuming, well, I see that it says those words there. I'm still trying to figure out what those letters on the bottom of the chart are, and they're not years. At first I thought maybe it was months, and maybe they just picked certain months, but then I couldn't figure out what the A's or the NRLYL were.
Let's flip ahead to the conclusion on page 10.
Okay.
And what we see as a conclusion, ultimately there are concerns that Dr. Howell is prescribing controlled substances to excess and maybe operating out of a pill mill facility in that medication is prescribed without medical necessity, right?
I see that.
And do you know whether when the state of Oklahoma received this report from Express Scripts, it advised Janssen of the conclusions that had been reached by Express Scripts about Dr. Howell's prescribing at that facility?
I don't know.
All right, if I may approach, Your Honor.
You may.
Thank you.
And Ms. White, I've handed you a copy of what we've marked as J595. Do you have that in front of you?
Yes.
And this is a final order including findings of fact and conclusions of law, correct?
Correct.
And Your Honor, we'd offer J595 and request permission to publish.
Absolutely no objection.
J595 will be admitted into the evidence and you may publish.
Thank you. And this is stamped April 2nd, 2015, correct, Ms. White?
Yes.
And I want you to go forward through the findings of fact and conclusions of law to page 8.
Do you want, when you say you want me to go forward through the findings and facts and
I just
conclusions
want you
of
to
law?
turn to page 8, please. You there?
I am.
And you see the indication there that after this is under Part O, that after Dr. Friedel left the clinic and Dr. Howell was terminated, the Oklahoma and Arkansas PMPs showed a substantial increase in respondents prescribing, showing that he prescribed a total of 44,850 CDSs, that's controlled dangerous substances, right?
CDS is controlled dangerous substance, yes.
Prescriptions from January 1st, 2013 through June 2014 for a total of 4,618,264 dosage units, right?
That's what it says, yes.
Do you know whether the state of Oklahoma during that January 1st, 2013 through June 2014 time period advised Janssen of the level of prescribing that Dr. Myers was doing?
I don't know.
We can do the math, that's about a year and a half. As I calculated, the first half of the year is fewer days than the second half. The first half is about 181 days in a non-leap year. So if you add that to 365, that's 546 days. And by my rough calculation, the 44,850 prescriptions would be 82 prescriptions a day every single day of the week. Sound about right to you?
I think so. If you want me to do the math real quick, I can.
Well, Ms. Conway can do it for us on the screen.
Perfect.
And Ms. Conway, it's 365 days for 2013 plus 181 days for the first half of 2014. That's 546. Now, if we clear that out and we take 44,850, and we divide that by 546, what do we get? That's more than 82 prescriptions every single day on average, 7 days a week for a year and a half, isn't it?
It's more than 82 prescriptions for the 546 days.
All right. And that information was never provided by the state to Janssen when the state had access to that through the PMP, was it?
I don't know.
That was 2013. That was 6 years after the investigation report that we saw of Dr. Myers, the undercover investigator who went into his clinic and
What was
seen.
2013? I'm sorry, I'm not following you.
The initial exhibit that we looked at related to Dr. Myers, the investigative report that is marked as J 2018, correct?
J 2018 appears to be marked September of 2014. That's why I'm confused. What's 2013?
it is reporting this 2014 document includes a report from the medical board on an undercover operation that occurred on July 28, 2007, correct?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm still trying to follow the 2013 you said at the beginning.
The period of this prescribing is 2013 up through the middle of 2014, correct?
Correct.
So actually, it's 7 years after, a period that ends 7 years after this report, right? 218?
This report is 2014. It says at the top, report date, September 25th, 2014.
And it reports on an investigator who went into the clinic on July 28, 2007, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And we see that the report that was filed following that investigation, if you turn to page 6 of the exhibit J280, that the investigator's report of that July 28, 2007 undercover visit is dated 2 days later, July 30th, 2007, and that's at the top of page 6, correct?
Correct.
All right. And the prescribing that Dr. Myers was doing in 2013, more than 82 prescriptions every day, was 6 years after this investigator had gone into his clinic and filed this report, correct?
That Dr. Myers was doing?
Correct. This prescribing that is described here is 44,850 prescriptions were occurring 6 years after the investigator had gone in and prepared her report. Correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Now, if you see there, the paragraph we looked at had a reference to Dr. Friedel, correct?
Yes, I see that.
Or Friedel, I'm not sure how the name is pronounced. And if you go to paragraph 13, at the bottom of the page, there's a description of what Dr. Friedel testified to in the findings of fact. You there?
Yes.
And he reports that in subparagraph C that when he first started working at the clinic in Roland, he had concerns about the appearance of patients, that he knew some of the patients were drug seekers trying to increase their dosages, right?
It says that.
And then if you go down to subparagraph E, he indicates that the PA, Tugas, was the owner of the clinic. And that as medical record, respondent Dr. Myers was the person that directed the medical care, but he did not supervise Dr. Friedel, and it was not his practice to give Dr. Friedel instructions or orders on things to do, right?
I see that.
And he indicates that he supervised the physician's assistant, Tugas. That's, by the way, one of the names of related subjects on Exhibit J218, isn't it?
On J218?
J218 is the report of the investigator, and there's a list of related subjects on the first page that we looked at. In the middle of the first page of J218.
Oh, sorry, hold on.
Previously.
Yep, you're right, sorry, I think. Hold on. Just stuck to the back of this. Yes, I'm sorry.
All right. He goes on to indicate that PA Tugas was his employer and that he did not have control over the frequency and number of patients he would see each day, that the number of patients he saw each day was controlled by Tugas's mother, Deborah Cox, right?
I see that.
Do you know whether other states outside of Oklahoma allow medical practices like this to be owned by non-doctors?
I I think I know, but I think I'd be speculating, so no, I cannot answer that with certainty.
Are you aware of a bill that was proposed that would have restricted ownership of medical practices to licensed physicians? I think it was actually called, well, colloquially, these things are referred to as pill mill laws. Are you familiar with one being proposed in Oklahoma within the last 5 years?
Am I familiar with it, or do I think there was one?
Are you aware that a law was proposed that would have restricted ownership in Oklahoma?
I think I know, but I'm not positive, so I would need to check.
Okay, not something you investigated in the course of preparing to offer your expert opinions to the court this morning, correct?
I don't agree with that.
So you did look into it, you just don't remember sitting here today?
I feel pretty certain it was something that was part of what I reviewed over the last 2 years, but sitting here at this very moment, I'm afraid to give an answer with certainty.
All right, fair enough. Let's keep running through this, and Your Honor, probably take another 5-10 minutes, if
That's
that's all
fine.
right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, if we go forward to page 10, and we take a look at subparagraph B, I'll give you a second to get there. We see an indication that as a result of the complaints from pharmacists and his police department's undercover officers buying drugs from persons that were connected to the clinic, it became apparent the persons selling the drugs were going to the clinic for no other reason than to get pills and sell on the street, right?
It says it became apparent to him, yes.
And that is, if we look at the prior page, that's in reference to Corporal Paul Smith of the Fort Smith, Arkansas Police Department, correct?
I don't know, we didn't look at that, I'm sorry, what are you pointing me to?
I was just giving you a reference point for that paragraph.
And I'm sorry, what is the reference point? Oh, the number 14?
Yeah, you responded to my question that he had reported that, and I was just giving you a reference to who the he is that's referenced there, but we can keep moving forward. So, if you look at subparagraph D, and this is a reference to Dr. Myers' wellness clinic. He indicates that he and other officers confirmed that pills were being sold on the street coming from the wellness clinic, and that he and other officers would then go back to the pharmacy to confirm the prescriptions after they picked up those pills. And further, if we go down to subparagraph E, that he located between 8 and 10 death certificates of patients at the clinic that had died of overdoses in a 2-year period of time around 2010 or 11 to 2013, correct?
I see that.
And that was 3 to 6 years after the investigator that we saw went into the clinic and filed a report that we had marked as Exhibit J218, correct?
Say it one more time, please.
We saw that, just in terms of time frame, 2010 or 11 to 2013 is 3 to 6 years after that medical board investigator had gone originally into Dr. Myers' clinic, correct?
Years.
2010 is 3 years after 2007, correct?
Yes,
And 2013 is 6 years after 2007.
correct.
All right. Now, if we go forward to the conclusion of the document, we see the order, which is on page 24. And the order is that Dr. Myers' OBNDD, Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics registration, number 20750, shall be revoked, and that he shall be prohibited from making reapplication for a period of 1 year, right?
I see that.
And he was ordered to pay a fine of $25,000, correct?
I see that.
And so what the order did is it allowed him to request reinstatement after a 1-year time period, right?
It says it prohibited from making reapplication for a new OBNDD registration for a period of 1 year.
And do you think that a 1-year revocation of the license of somebody who is engaging in prescribing practices like this is a sufficient step to take to combat the opioid crisis?
Your Honor, it seems to me he's asking for opinion on the ruling of this order. It seems to me he's asking for a legal conclusion there that doesn't seem appropriate, so I object.
Your Honor, this goes to the opinion she's offered on abatement and causes of the opioid crisis. It's not asking for an opinion as to whether this was an appropriate penalty under any governing statute.
Overrule the objection.
I'm confused on what in the abatement plan the state has offered has to do with registrant reapplication, so I'm not understanding what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Let me ask the question this way for you, Ms. Wright, and hopefully I can clarify it for you. Do you believe that a 1-year revocation of a license for somebody who engaged in the type of conduct like we saw here is sufficient to combat the opioid crisis?
This is the first time I've seen this investigation and the materials that you provided it with it. In order to tell you whether or not I thought that was sufficient, I need to read all of this to understand that. You're asking me to draw a conclusion from something that you've only shown me highlights from.
Okay, so this is not then something that you looked at in the course of preparing to come to court and offer opinions today as to the causes of the opioid crisis, given that you're just seeing them today for the first time, fair?
Right, I think we already talked about that.
All right, are you aware, however, as to how this story ended with the state ultimately filing racketeering charges against Dr. Howell, Dr. Friedel, Dr. Myers, and the physician assistant Tugas in 2016?
I was not.
All right. Were you aware that Dr. Howell was ultimately charged with first-degree murder?
I don't remember knowing that for certain.
All right. Well, let's take a look to sum it all up at the events that we have talked about so far, and I have a demonstrative exhibit, Your Honor, and we can wrap it up. Let me approach, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
It's Ms. Fisher's, that's Ms. Fisher's department.
Yeah, we have a system in place, we just want them to do that.
You can do that tonight. Thank you.
And if we may publish, Your Honor,
You may.
and it's, this one was coming. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
So, Ms. White, we looked at the July 28, 2007 report here, right? J218?
Yes.
We looked at, excuse me, the Express Scripts investigative report for Medicare Part D, right?
Yes.
And then ultimately, we saw that it was in April of 2015 that OBN revoked Dr. Myers' registration, citing unlawful prescribing and 8 to 10 patient deaths in just 2 years. We saw that, correct?
I believe so.
And the last question I have for you is, in all of this time, 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, did the state of Oklahoma ever report to Janssen what it had uncovered about Dr. Myers' prescribing practices?
I think I already said I don't know, and I don't know.
Thank you. Your Honor, this would be a good spot if you intend upon adjourning.
Yes, we'll call today, and we will resume again at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I leave all this here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Myers timeline, which is the last one. Let's, okay.
Whichever order, just whatever you want to do.
We'll do the Myers timeline report, exhibit 119. Also, the incidence of neonatal abstinence syndrome with the methamphetamine admissions and deaths will be court exhibit 120. Okay, those are the only two hard copies I have of course exhibits. smells like WD-40 in here.
I would have done it for you, you know, I'm a WD-40 person.
I know. It's okay, I got it.
I think you take all these.
Good morning.
Are you needing me?
Oh, no, I was reading something waiting,
Okay.
and I lost track of it. I just always wait up here.
We're done for the day.
Yes, sir.
I would, but it's a little distracting from the camera.
That one.
I just need to get solid 8 hours of sleep, which I haven't got in a long time.
It should be over.
I just don't go to bed till too late. Okay, was the last one 119? So end it.
It'll be interesting to see how much there will be evidence. The jury are gonna put on these things.
Okay, I've got 3 back here.
Brenda. I got it. Probably in the stack somewhere. Amy. Yeah, up front. Me? Did you have trouble today?
No, it worked perfectly today.
Yeah, there's a spot. I know, thank you.
By the time this is over, nothing in the room's gonna squeak.
She was talking about it, I was like, I'll get that before you know where it is.
Yes, I was just saying that. We fixed the doors.
But
Do that for those. Is your chair done squeaking?
I think it is. It might be, well,
For now.
yeah.
But it's weird, it's not letting me.
No pictures?
But for some reason, I mean, you gotta be able to put this.
How much is that?
My writing is just terrible.
I was told y'all.
Yep.
Okay. That binder,
It's,
Oh.
116.
Okay.
yeah, it's Angie's.
Is that
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was yours.
That's okay, we have a system.
I'm
That's
glad.
good. Okay, you don't have to worry about it.
So, I think they're gonna put you on that Dropbox though that has all the court exhibits on it.
Can you share that password with me from your phone?
I like that. I have
So we're good?
Do you have an iPhone?
I did.
It says I can access this web network by bringing your iPhone near the iPhone that's connected to the network.
I'm not gonna do that.
Do you
going in and connecting to it. It's not letting me connect to the password.
Let me try.
What password? Oh.
Yeah.